My twin brother called me sobbing from the darkness of his own garage because his wife had beaten him over a broken ceramic plate. She controlled his bank accounts, his medications, and his dignity for 30 years. She thought she had broken him completely. She was wrong. She did not know that he had an identical twin brother who was a former Marine and had zero tolerance for bullies. I switched places with him. I shaved my beard, put on his worn-out clothes, and walked into the lion's den. She thought she was yelling at her submissive husband. She had no idea she was facing a man who knows exactly how to dismantle a threat. Before I tell you how I made her regret the day she was born, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. I am Calvin Mercer. At 68 years old, I have built half the structural skyline of Chicago. I deal in steel, concrete, and absolutes. I do not deal in feelings. My brother Alvin deals in literature and poetry. We were born minutes apart, but we could not be more different. I chose the core and then engineering. He chose the classroom and romance. I stayed single and amassed a quiet fortune. He married Pamela and slowly lost his soul. I had not seen Alvin in person for 5 years. We drifted apart because I could not stand watching his wife treat him like a servant, and he was too ashamed to admit I was right. I thought he was just henpecked. I did not know he was a prisoner. Last Tuesday, I was standing on the balcony of my penthouse drinking black coffee and reviewing blueprints for a new stadium. My phone buzzed on the glass table. It was a video call request from Alvin. It was 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Alvin never called during the day. Pamela did not allow him to use the phone when she was awake. I accepted the call. The face staring back at me was my own, but it was ruined. It was a version of me that had been chewed up and spit out. He was huddled in the corner of a dark garage sitting on a pile of old newspapers. The light from the phone screen highlighted a purple bruise swelling explicitly over his left eye. A thin line of dried blood ran from his split lip down to his chin. He was trembling so hard the image on my screen shook violently. He did not say hello. He just looked at me with one good eye and whispered that he wanted to die. He said he had a bottle of sleeping pills in his hand and he was ready to swallow them all because he could not take another day. I did not offer him pity. Pity is useless. Pity is what got him into this mess. I put down my coffee cup and used my command voice. I told him to put the bottle down. I demanded a sit rep. I needed to know exactly what happened. Alvin took a breath that sounded like a rattle in his chest. He told me he was washing the dishes after lunch. His hands were shaking because of the medication Pamela forced him to take. A decorative plate slipped. It shattered. Pamela did not scream. She just walked over and backhanded him across the face with her diamond ring. The metal cut his lip. Then she pushed him. He fell against the counter and hit his eye. She told him he was a clumsy parasite. She told him that the plate was worth more than his life. Then she locked him out of the house and told him to sleep in the garage until he learned how to be useful. I felt a cold rage spreading through my chest. It was the same feeling I used to get before a combat patrol. I asked him about his finances. I asked why he did not just check into a hotel. Alvin laughed, and it was the sound of a broken man. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a single crumpled $10 bill. He told me this was his allowance for the week. Pamela had power of attorney. She convinced him to sign it 5 years ago when he had a mild bout of pneumonia. She told him it was for his own good. Now she controlled his pension, his savings, and the deed to the house our parents left him. She gave him $10 a week and checked his receipts. If he bought a candy bar without permission, she cut the allowance to $5. I looked at the $10 bill and then at his bruised face. My brother was a hostage. He was a man who had taught Shakespeare to thousands of students reduced to hiding in a garage with $10 and a death wish. I made a decision instantly. I told him to listen to me very carefully. I told him to stand up. I told him to find his car keys. He said she kept the keys to his sedan, but he had the spare key to the old pickup truck hidden in the tool chest. I told him to get in that truck and drive north. I told him to drive straight to Chicago. I told him not to pack a bag. I told him not to leave a note. I told him to just drive. Alvin tried to argue. He was terrified she would call the police. He was terrified she would report the truck stolen. I cut him off. I told him that if he did not get in that truck right now, he would be dead by next week and I would be the one planning his funeral. I refused to bury my twin brother because of a woman named Pamela. He nodded slowly. He wiped the blood from his chin. He said he was on his way. I stayed on the line with him until he started the engine. I listened as he backed out of the garage. I waited until he was on the interstate before I hung up. Then I called my assistant and told her to clear my schedule for the next month. I told her I had a family emergency. Alvin arrived in Chicago 14 hours later. When I opened my door, the smell hit me first. It was the smell of fear and neglect. He was wearing a stained polo shirt and pants that were 2 sizes too big. He had lost at least 30 pounds. His skin was gray. He looked like an old man. I am 68, but I box 3 times a week. I run 5 miles every morning. Alvin looked like he was 80. He stood in my foyer, clutching that $10 bill like it was a lifeline. He looked at my marble floors and my leather furniture, and he started to cry again. He apologized for the intrusion. He apologized for being weak. He apologized for being alive. I took him to the guest bathroom. I gave him a fresh towel. I told him to shower and shave. I cooked him a steak. He ate it with his hands tearing at the meat like a starving animal. It broke my heart, but I did not show it. I poured him a glass of expensive bourbon. He flinched when I raised the bottle. He thought I was going to hit him. That flinch sealed Pamela's fate. That tiny, involuntary movement of fear told me everything I needed to know about the last 30 years of his life. We sat in my living room until the sun came up. He told me everything. He told me about the pills she made him take that made his mind foggy. He told me about Jordan, his son, my nephew, who watched his mother humiliate his father and did nothing. He told me about Courtney, the daughter-in-law, who treated him like a waiter in his own dining room. He told me they were planning to put him in a state-run nursing home next month so they could sell the house and buy a vacation property in Florida. They had convinced everyone in their social circle that Alvin was suffering from dementia. They had isolated him so completely that no one would believe him if he spoke up. I looked at my brother, then I looked at my reflection in the dark window. We were identical. Same height, same eyes, same nose. If I slumped my shoulders and put on his glasses, I was him. If he stood up straight and put on my suit, he was me. The plan formed in my mind with the precision of a structural drawing. Legal action would take too long. A lawsuit would alert them. They would hide the assets. They would claim he was mentally incompetent. They would win. The law is slow, but justice needs to be fast. I stood up. I walked over to the mirror. I took off my Rolex. I took off my tailored jacket. I unbuttoned my shirt. I told Alvin to stand up. I told him to take off his clothes. He looked confused. He asked me what I was doing. I told him we were going to play a game. I told him he was going to stay here in my penthouse. He was going to eat my food, sleep in my bed, and recover. I would hire the best doctors to document his injuries. I would hire the best forensic accountants to trace the money, but I would not be here to oversee it. Alvin asked where I was going. I picked up his stained polo shirt from the floor. It smelled of sweat and old grief. I put it on. It was loose around my chest. I slumped my shoulders. I practiced the tremor in my right hand that I had seen him do. I looked at him and spoke in his soft, trembling voice. I told him I was going home to Pamela. I told him I was going to Atlanta. Alvin grabbed my arm. He was terrified. He said she would know. He said she would kill me. He said I did not know what she was capable of. I removed his hand gently but firmly. I looked him in the eye. I told him that Pamela relies on his fear. She relies on the fact that he will never fight back. She relies on 30 years of conditioning. She is expecting a sheep to walk back through that door. She is not expecting a wolf. I went to the bathroom and shaved off my signature goatee. I looked at myself in the mirror. Without the beard, with the bruised posture, I was Alvin. I practiced the flinch. I practiced the downward gaze. It was perfect. I came back out and handed Alvin my credit card. I told him to buy whatever he wanted. I told him to rest. Then I took his truck keys. I took the $10 bill. I put it in my pocket. That $10 bill was going to be the evidence that brought her down. I drove his battered pickup truck south. The drive gave me time to think. I memorized the names he gave me: Pamela, Jordan, Courtney, the neighbors, the doctor who prescribed the pills. I was not just going undercover. I was going to war. I was an engineer. I knew that if you want to bring down a building, you do not hit it with a wrecking ball from the outside. You plant explosives at the structural columns in the basement. You detonate it from within. Pamela had built her empire on my brother's back. I was going to be the structural failure she never saw coming. I pulled into the driveway of his house in Atlanta just as the sun was setting. It was a large, ostentatious house with manicured hedges and a fountain that looked like it cost more than my first car. I saw the lights on inside. I saw a shadow move across the window. I gripped the steering wheel. My hands were not shaking. My heart was steady. I was a Marine. I had cleared insurgent strongholds in the desert. I had negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts with corrupt city officials. I was not afraid of a 65-year-old woman in a floral dress. I turned off the engine. I grabbed the small bag of clothes I had packed Alvin's clothes. I walked up the driveway. I made sure to drag my feet. I made sure to hunch my back. I reached for the door handle. It was unlocked. I took a deep breath, suppressing the alpha energy that had defined my life for 40 years. I let the persona of the beaten husband wash over me. I opened the door and stepped into the foyer. Pamela was standing there. She was holding a glass of wine. She looked at me with pure disgust. She did not ask where I had been. She did not ask if I was hurt. She just rolled her eyes and turned her back on me. She told me I was late. She told me to get in the kitchen and clean up the mess I made before I broke anything else. She threw an apron at me. It hit me in the chest and fell to the floor. I looked at the apron. Then I looked at the back of her head. I picked up the apron. I did not say a word. I walked toward the kitchen. The game had begun. She thought she had won because I came back. She did not know that the man walking into her kitchen was already calculating exactly how to destroy her. I tied the apron strings. I was inside. And the demolition was about to start. The engine of the rusted pickup truck ticked as it cooled down in the driveway. I sat behind the wheel for a moment and stared at the house. It was a sprawling colonial structure with white pillars and perfectly manicured boxwood hedges. To the outside world, this was the residence of a respectable retired couple. To my brother Alvin, it was a black site prison camp where the torture was psychological and the warden wore pearls. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. Shoulders slumped, head down, eyes averted. I was no longer Calvin Mercer, the man who stared down union bosses and structural failures. I was Alvin the beaten dog. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the truck. The gravel crunched under my boots. Every step toward that front door felt like walking into a live fire zone without a vest. I reached for the doorknob. My hand did not shake, but I forced it to tremble. I had to sell this. I twisted the knob and pushed the door open. The air inside was cold and smelled of lemon polish and expensive potpourri. It was the smell of a museum, not a home. I took 2 steps into the foyer. Pamela was waiting. She stood by the hallway table, tapping a manicured fingernail against the wood. She did not look relieved to see me. She looked annoyed that I had returned at all. "You are late," she snapped. Her voice was like a whip cracking in the silence. She did not ask where I had been. She did not ask if I was okay after threatening suicide. She only cared that her schedule had been disrupted. She looked me up and down with a sneer that twisted her face into something ugly. "You look disgusting. Go wash your face. Jordan and Courtney will be here in an hour, and I will not have you looking like a vagrant at my dinner table." My instinct was to straighten my spine. My instinct was to cross the room in 2 strides and tell her exactly who she was talking to. I felt the heat rise in my chest. It was the same adrenaline dump I used to feel before kicking down a door in a combat zone. But I swallowed it. I forced the bile down. I looked at the floor tiles. I mumbled an apology. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. "I am sorry, Pamela. I lost track of time." She huffed a dismissive sound that vibrated with contempt. She walked past me toward the kitchen, her heels clicking rhythmically on the hardwood. It was the cadence of authority. "Follow me," she ordered over her shoulder. "Do not just stand there like a senile old fool. We have work to do." I followed her. I kept my head down, but my eyes were scanning everything. I noted the expensive art on the walls. I noted the new furniture that Alvin had never mentioned. I noted the way she took up all the space in the room, expanding her presence while shrinking his. We entered the kitchen. It was pristine. White marble counters, stainless steel appliances. It looked like a showroom, not a place where people cooked. Pamela stopped in the center of the room. She grabbed a floral apron from the counter. She did not hand it to me. She threw it. The fabric hit me squarely in the face. The humiliation was sudden and sharp. It was a calculated move. It was designed to remind me that I was not a husband. I was staff. For a split second, the mask almost slipped. My hand shot up to catch the apron before it hit the floor. The movement was too fast. It was too precise. It was the reaction of a man with reflex training. I froze. I waited for her to notice, but Pamela had already turned her back. She was too arrogant to pay attention. She assumed I was clumsy. She assumed I was slow. She did not see the predator standing 3 feet behind her. "Tie that on," she commanded. "The potatoes need peeling. The roast needs basting. And for God's sake, try not to cut your fingers off this time. We cannot afford another emergency room bill. I cannot believe you broke that plate earlier. Do you know how much that cost?" It was an antique. But of course you do not care. You do not contribute a dime to this household, so you do not understand the value of things. I tied the apron around my waist. The knot felt like a noose. I walked to the sink. There was a pile of potatoes waiting. I picked up the peeler. My grip tightened on the handle. I looked at the back of her neck as she adjusted a flower arrangement. It would be so easy to end this right now. It would be so easy to tell her the truth. But that would not be justice. That would just be a confrontation. I needed to destroy her world, not just her evening. I needed evidence. I needed to see exactly how deep the rot went. I started peeling. I forced my hands to be clumsy. I let the peeler slip. I let the skins fall on the floor. Pamela turned around and sighed. "Look at you," she said. "Useless. Absolutely useless. I do not know why I put up with you. I suppose I am just too kind-hearted. I give, and you just take." She walked over to a cabinet and pulled out a prescription bottle. The sound of the pills rattling inside was loud in the quiet kitchen. "It is time for your medicine," she said. Her voice changed. It became saccharine. Fake sweet. It was the voice one uses for a child or a dog. "You missed your afternoon dose because you ran away. We have to double up now. We do not want you getting confused again, do we?" She shook 2 blue pills into her palm. She held them out to me. I looked at the pills. Alvin had told me about these. He said they made him feel like he was walking underwater. They made his hands shake. They made his memory blur. They were not medicine. They were chemical restraints. I wiped my hands on the apron. I reached out. My hand trembled. This time the tremor was fake, but the rage fueling it was real. I took the pills. "Open up," she said. She wanted to watch me swallow them. I placed the pills on my tongue. I took the glass of water she offered. I took a large gulp. But I did not swallow the pills. I slid them under my tongue, pressing them into the soft tissue, a trick I learned in the field to avoid ingesting questionable local remedies while maintaining diplomatic relations. "Good boy," she said. She actually patted my cheek. Her hand was cold. The ring on her finger scratched my skin. It was the same ring she had used to cut Alvin's lip. The urge to grab that hand and twist it until the bones snapped was overwhelming. My heart hammered against my ribs. I turned back to the sink quickly so she would not see the fire in my eyes. "Now finish the potatoes," she said. "Jordan and Courtney will be here soon. Courtney is bringing her mother. I want everything perfect. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not tell your boring stories. No one wants to hear about your old students or your poetry. Just sit there and eat and try not to drool." I nodded. I kept peeling. The water from the tap ran cold over my hands. Pamela left the kitchen to go change her dress. As soon as she was gone, I spit the pills into my hand. I wrapped them in a paper towel and shoved them deep into my pocket. I would send these to the lab tomorrow. I needed to know exactly what poison she was feeding my brother. I looked around the kitchen. This was my observation post. I noted the calendar on the wall. It was filled with social events, spa appointments, and luncheons. Alvin's name appeared nowhere. I noted the stack of mail on the counter. Bills, invitations, bank statements. I wanted to go through them, but I heard a car pulling into the driveway. Jordan was here, my nephew, the boy I had sent birthday checks to for 30 years. The boy who watched his father wither away and did nothing. I felt a different kind of anger for him. Pamela was a monster, but Jordan was a coward, and cowards are often more dangerous because they have no code. I sat down at the small kitchen table, the one shoved in the corner where the servants would eat. I waited. I put my hands on my knees. Under the table, out of sight, I made a fist. I squeezed. I squeezed until my knuckles turned white. I squeezed until my fingernails dug into my palm and broke the skin. The sharp sting of pain grounded me. It reminded me that I was real. It reminded me that I was strong. I looked at the small drop of blood on my palm. This was the only blood I intended to shed. The rest would be theirs. The back door opened. I heard Jordan's voice. He was laughing. It was a loud, entitled laugh. "Hey, Mom," he shouted. "Is the old man behaving himself today, or do we need to put him in a kennel?" Courtney giggled. The sound was high-pitched and cruel. I stayed seated. I did not turn around. I stared at the wall. Let them laugh. Let them think I am broken. Let them walk right into the trap. I relaxed my fist. I wiped the drop of blood on my pants. I took a deep breath. Phase 1 was complete. I was inside. The enemy was comfortable. And they had absolutely no idea that the war had just begun. The dining room table was set with the kind of precision that usually precedes a military tribunal. Crystal wine glasses sparkled under the chandelier light. Heavy silverware was aligned perfectly with the edges of the porcelain plates. It was a display of wealth and sophistication, none of which belonged to the people sitting at the table. I stood by the sideboard holding a pitcher of ice water because Pamela had instructed me that I was not allowed to sit until everyone else had been served. She told me it was because I was clumsy, and she did not want me ruining the tablecloth before the guests arrived. But I knew the truth. She wanted to remind me of my place. In her kingdom, I was not the king. I was not even a citizen. I was the help. The front door opened, and the air in the house immediately changed. It became heavier, charged with the static electricity of entitlement. Jordan walked in first. My nephew, my brother's son. He was 35 years old, wearing a golf shirt that cost more than Alvin's monthly allowance. He walked with a swagger that he had not earned, a confidence born from never having to work for a single dollar in his life. Behind him was Courtney. She was a vision of manufactured perfection, with blonde hair that was sprayed into submission and a dress that looked uncomfortable just to look at. She carried a bright orange Hermes Birkin bag. I know the brand because I have bought expensive gifts for business partners over the years. That bag cost at least $15,000. It was worth more than the truck I drove down here. She dropped it onto the floor next to her chair with a careless thump, as if it were a bag of groceries. "Hello, Mother," Jordan boomed, ignoring me completely. He walked right past me to kiss Pamela on the cheek. He did not look at me. To him, I was just a piece of furniture, and a worn-out one at that. Courtney wrinkled her nose as she entered the dining room. "It smells like mothballs in here," she said. Her voice was sharp like glass grinding on stone. "Can we open a window? It is stifling." Pamela laughed, a tinkling artificial sound. "Oh, stop it, Courtney. That is just Alvin. He insists on wearing those old sweaters even though I bought him new clothes. He is just stubborn." I stood there gripping the handle of the water pitcher. My knuckles were white. The urge to pour the ice water over Jordan's head was so strong I had to bite the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. But I did not move. I waited. I was on a mission. And a soldier does not break cover just because the enemy is rude. "Sit down, Dad," Jordan said, finally waving his hand toward the end of the table without looking at me. "Just try not to spill anything today, okay? Courtney is wearing silk." I sat. My seat was not at the head of the table. That spot was taken by Jordan. I was placed at the far end near the kitchen door in a chair that was slightly lower than the others. It was a subtle psychological trick. They were literally looking down on me. Dinner was a torture session disguised as a family meal. Pamela had prepared a roast, but she served me a small portion of boiled vegetables and mashed potatoes. She told the table it was because of my digestion. She said my system could not handle rich food anymore. I watched Jordan cut into a thick slice of prime rib, the juice running onto his plate. I watched him devour the food that Alvin's pension had paid for. "So," Jordan said, chewing with his mouth open, "I have a new investment opportunity. It is a tech startup, crypto mining in the cloud. I need $50,000 to get in on the ground floor. It is a sure thing." Pamela smiled at him, her eyes shining with adoration. "That sounds wonderful, darling. You are so smart with money, just like your grandfather." I almost choked on my water. My father, their grandfather, was a man who saved every penny and invested in solid real estate. He would have looked at Jordan and laughed him out of the room. Jordan was not smart with money. He was a gambler who used business buzzwords to hide his incompetence. "We can pull the money from the emergency fund," Pamela continued. "I will sign the transfer tomorrow." "But what about Dad's care?" Courtney asked. She did not sound concerned. She sounded calculating. She was looking at me like I was an item on a budget spreadsheet that needed to be deleted. "If we move him to that facility in Stone Mountain, the monthly cost goes down significantly. I toured it yesterday. It is adequate. Adequate," I repeated in my head. Stone Mountain was a state-funded warehouse for the indigent. It was where people went to wait for death in rooms that smelled of bleach and despair. They were discussing throwing me into a dumpster while eating the food I provided. "It is a bit far," Pamela said, sipping her wine. "But you are right. We need to prioritize. Jordan's future is more important than pampering an old man who does not even know what day it is. Look at him. He is staring at his potatoes like he has never seen food before." I was not staring at my potatoes. I was staring at Courtney's Hermes bag. It was sitting on the floor right next to her chair. The bright orange leather was gleaming under the lights. It was open. Inside, I could see a designer wallet and a phone. It was the symbol of everything they valued: status, appearance, greed. Courtney sighed loudly. "This soup is cold, Pamela, and I asked for sparkling water, not tap. Can we get some service in here?" She looked at me. She snapped her fingers. 2 sharp clicks. "Dad, get up. Get the sparkling water from the fridge and heat up this soup." Something inside me shifted. It was the click of a safety being disengaged. I looked at her. I looked at Jordan, who was busy texting on his phone. I looked at Pamela, who was watching me with that familiar look of disdain. I stood up. I made sure to struggle. I pushed against the table, letting my chair scrape loudly against the floor. I hunched my shoulders. I adopted the posture of the defeated. "I am sorry," I mumbled. My voice was a rasp. "I will get it." I picked up the large tureen of tomato bisque from the center of the table. It was heavy. It was still steaming hot. Pamela had placed it there for second helpings. I held it with both hands. I started to shuffle toward Courtney. "Careful," Pamela warned. "Watch where you are going." I reached Courtney's chair. I was standing right behind her. The Hermes bag was directly beneath my left hand. I looked at the back of her head. I looked at the expensive silk of her dress. I allowed the tremor to start. It began in my fingertips, a subtle vibration that I had practiced in the mirror for hours. I let it travel up my arms. I let the heavy ceramic bowl shake. "Whoa, watch it," Jordan said, looking up from his phone. It happened in slow motion. I pretended to stumble. My foot caught on the leg of Courtney's chair. I lurched forward. I released my grip on the left side of the tureen. Gravity took over. The bowl tipped. A waterfall of thick, red-hot tomato bisque poured out. It did not hit Courtney. That would have been assault. It hit the floor, directly into the open mouth of the $20,000 Hermes Birkin bag. The sound was a wet, heavy splash. The soup filled the bag like a bucket. It overflowed, coating the orange leather in a thick, oily red sludge. It splattered onto Courtney's shoes. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence. Then the screaming started. Courtney shrieked like a banshee. She jumped up, knocking her chair over. "My bag! My bag! You stupid old man! You ruined my bag!" She dove for the bag, plunging her hands into the hot soup to retrieve her phone. Her hands came up covered in red slime. She looked at me with eyes that wanted to kill. Jordan stood up, his face purple. "Are you crazy? Are you blind? That bag cost more than your life." Pamela was on her feet, grabbing napkins, trying to blot the soup that was soaking into the Persian rug. "You idiot! You clumsy, useless idiot! I told you not to touch anything." I stood there, clutching the empty tureen. I let my jaw hang open. I made my eyes wide with fake terror. "I am sorry," I stammered. I tripped. My hands, they just let go. "Get out of my sight!" Courtney screamed. She was crying now, actual tears over a leather accessory. "Get him out of here before I strangle him." "Go to the garage," Pamela yelled. "Go, and do not come back in until I tell you." I backed away. I kept my head down. I looked terrified. But as I turned toward the kitchen door, I allowed myself a single small smile that they could not see. The dinner was ruined. The mood was destroyed. The financial loss was significant. But more importantly, I had seen something crucial. When the soup hit the bag, Courtney didn't check on her husband. Jordan didn't check on his mother. They all scrambled for the money. They were not a family. They were a corporation of greed, and I had just caused a market crash. I walked into the kitchen and put the tureen in the sink. I could still hear Courtney screaming in the dining room. I grabbed a piece of bread from the counter and a bottle of water. Then I opened the door to the garage. It was cold in the garage, but I did not feel it. I felt the warmth of victory. I sat down on the cot Alvin slept on. I took a bite of the bread. It tasted better than the prime rib they were eating. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened the app connected to the hidden cameras I had installed that morning. I watched the feed from the dining room. They were still arguing. Courtney was wiping her bag, sobbing that it was ruined forever. Jordan was yelling at Pamela for letting me live in the house. And then I heard it. The sentence that changed the mission from a rescue to an execution. Jordan slammed his hand on the table. "We cannot wait until next month, Mom. We need to get rid of him now. If he ruins one more deal or breaks one more thing, I am done. We need to declare him incompetent by Friday." I know a judge who owes me a favor. We can bypass the medical exam if we pay him enough. Pamela nodded. She looked at the red stain on the rug. Do it, she said. Get the papers ready. I will drug his tea heavily on Thursday night. He won't even know what he is signing. I turned off the phone screen. The darkness of the garage wrapped around me. Friday. They were going to make their move on Friday. Today was Tuesday. I had 3 days. I finished my bread. I stood up and walked over to Alvin's workbench. I picked up a heavy wrench and weighed it in my hand. Not for violence, for building. I was an engineer, and I had 3 days to construct a trap that they would never be able to escape. You want to declare war on Friday? I whispered to the empty garage. Fine, but you should have checked the enemy's resume first. I lay down on the cot and closed my eyes. I slept like a baby, because on Friday the Mercer family was going to have a reckoning, and I was going to be the judge, jury, and executioner. Wednesday morning began with the ritual of poverty. I stood in the kitchen wearing my brother's frayed cardigan, waiting for my allowance like a child waiting for lunch money. Pamela sat at the granite island reviewing the credit card statement with a gold pen. She looked up at me over the rim of her reading glasses. Her expression was a mix of pity and annoyance, the kind one reserves for a stray dog that refuses to leave the porch. She reached into her purse and pulled out a $10 bill. She did not hand it to me. She slid it across the counter. It stopped near the edge, dangerously close to falling off. Here is your money for the week, Alvin, she said. Try to make it last this time. I saw a receipt for a chocolate bar in your pocket last week. You know sugar is bad for your joints. If I find another receipt like that next week, it will be $5. I looked at the bill, $10. A grown man, a retired educator who had worked for 40 years, was being given $10 to survive a week in a city where a cup of coffee cost $4. I looked at the credit card statement she was marking up. Even upside down, I could read the numbers. I have been reading blueprints and balance sheets since before she was born. I saw a charge for $2,000 at a pro shop. I pointed a shaking finger at the statement. What is that? I asked, keeping my voice weak and raspy. Pamela snatched the paper away. That is none of your business. But if you must know, Jordan needed new clubs. He is networking with important clients. He is building a future, something you never did. Jordan walked in at that moment, spinning a set of car keys on his finger. Thanks for the clubs, Mom, he said. He grabbed an apple from the bowl and took a bite. He looked at me and winked. Don't spend that $10 all in one place, Dad. Maybe you can buy a clue with it. They both laughed. It was a casual cruelty that made my blood run cold. I picked up the $10 bill. I folded it neatly. I placed it in my pocket. I did not say thank you. I turned and walked to the garage. I got into the truck and drove straight to the bank. It was the main branch of First National, the bank where my parents had opened their accounts 50 years ago. The bank where Alvin's life savings were supposed to be secure. I parked the truck and sat for a moment. I needed to switch gears. Inside that house, I was the victim. But in the financial world, I was a predator. I checked my reflection. I looked old and tired, but my eyes were sharp. I was about to walk into a building designed to intimidate people, and I was going to turn it into my personal command center. I walked into the lobby. The air conditioning was freezing. The marble floors echoed with the sound of my cheap shoes. I approached the teller counter. The young woman behind the glass looked at my clothes, then at my face. She sighed. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked. She spoke loudly and slowly, articulating every syllable as if I were deaf or stupid. "Do you have an account with us?" I leaned against the counter. "I need to see the branch manager," I said. My voice was low but steady. She blinked. "Mr. Henderson is very busy, sir. If you want to make a withdrawal, I can help you here. Do you have your ID? I need to see Mr. Henderson," I repeated. "Tell him Alvin Mercer is here. Tell him I have questions about the wire transfer authorization protocols on my joint account." The teller paused. She looked confused. She had expected me to ask for my balance or try to cash a Social Security check. She had not expected me to use technical banking terminology. She picked up the phone. She whispered something, looking at me nervously. A moment later, she hung up. "Mr. Henderson will see you briefly," she said. "Third door on the left." I walked to the office. The door was open. Mr. Henderson was a man in his 40s with a cheap suit and a nervous smile. He stood up as I entered. He did not offer to shake my hand. He pointed to the chair opposite his desk. "Alvin, good to see you," he said. His tone was condescending. Pamela called me last week. She said you might be coming by. She said you have been having some episodes, confusion about your money. I sat down. I did not slump. I sat with the posture of a man who owns the building. I looked at the nameplate on his desk. Robert Henderson. Close the door. Robert, I said. He froze. It was the tone. It was the command voice I used on construction sites when a foreman was cutting corners. He looked at me puzzled. He walked over and closed the door. Now, Robert, I said, leaning forward, let us cut the act. I know Pamela has power of attorney. I know she told you I am mentally incompetent. I know you have been approving transfers from my primary savings into an offshore LLC registered in the Cayman Islands under Jordan's name. Henderson turned pale. He sat down heavily. I don't know what you are talking about, Alvin. Everything is legal. Pamela handles your affairs because... Stop, I interrupted. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket. It was not the $10 bill. It was a list I had compiled from the documents I found in the trash and the snippets I heard on the phone. Regulation E of the Electronic Fund Transfer Act requires a dual signature for any transfer exceeding $10,000 from a joint account where one party has been flagged as vulnerable, I said. I recited the banking code from memory. I saw no second signature on the transfer dated October 14th. I saw no second signature on the transfer dated November 2nd. Henderson started to sweat. He loosened his tie. Alvin, listen, you are confused. Your memory isn't what it used to be. Pamela signed for you. Power of attorney allows her to manage funds for my benefit, I said. It does not allow her to gift $50,000 to a shell company with no employees and no revenue. That is called embezzlement, Robert. And facilitating it is called wire fraud. That is a federal crime. 10 years in prison. Minimum. The silence in the room was heavy. The air conditioner hummed, but Henderson was sweating profusely. He looked at the phone. He was thinking about calling security. He was thinking about calling Pamela. I would not do that, I said, reading his mind. If you pick up that phone, I will walk out of here and go straight to the FBI field office. I will ask for a forensic audit of this entire branch. And Robert, we both know they will find more than just my account, won't they? A man who breaks the rules once usually breaks them a dozen times. Henderson took his hand off the phone. He looked at me. He was terrified. He was no longer looking at a senile old man. He was looking at a ruin. What do you want, Alvin? He whispered. I want access, I said. I want you to open a safe deposit box for me. Right now, in my name only. No power of attorney attached. No notification to Pamela. And I want you to print out the full transaction history of my accounts for the last 5 years. Unredacted. He shook his head. I can't. Pamela monitors everything. She gets alerts. You are the branch manager, I said. You can bypass the alert system for administrative purposes. You can flag the account as under manual review. That stops the automated texts for 48 hours. Do it. Henderson hesitated. I leaned back in the chair and tapped my fingers on the desk. It was the sound of a ticking clock. Tick-tock, Robert, I said. Federal prison is not a nice place for a man with soft hands like yours. He typed. His hands were shaking. I watched him. I watched the power dynamic shift in real time. 10 minutes ago, I was a beggar with $10. Now I was the one holding the leash. Here, he said, sliding a key across the desk. Box 404. I set it up as a legacy box. It won't show up on the monthly statement. And the records, he printed them. The printer whirred, page after page of betrayal. I watched the paper stack up. Every sheet was proof of how they had bled my brother dry. They had bought cars. They had paid for vacations. They had bought jewelry, all while he sat in a garage with a $10 bill. I took the stack of papers. I took the key. I stood up. Thank you, Robert, I said. You have been very helpful. One more thing, he said. His voice was trembling. Please don't tell Pamela. She is a difficult woman. I smiled. It was a cold, shark-like smile. Oh, I won't tell her, Robert. When she finds out, it won't be from me. It will be when the handcuffs click shut. I walked out of his office. I walked past the teller who had treated me like a child. I walked into the vault. I found box 404. I placed the stack of papers inside. I also placed the vial of blue pills I had saved. I had my evidence. I had my secure location. I had a terrified accomplice inside the bank. I walked out of the bank and into the bright sunlight. I felt lighter. I felt dangerous. I pulled the $10 bill out of my pocket. I looked at it one last time. This was not an allowance anymore. This was seed money. I walked over to a hot dog stand on the corner. I bought a hot dog with everything on it and a large soda. It cost $6. I ate it standing up watching the traffic. It was the best meal I had eaten in years. I had $4 left, and I had the key to their destruction in my pocket. I got back into the truck. I checked the time. It was noon. Pamela would be at her yoga class. Jordan would be sleeping off a hangover. The house was empty. It was time to go back. It was time to install the microphones. It was time to turn their sanctuary into a surveillance state. I started the engine. The old truck roared to life. I patted the dashboard. "Hang on, Alvin," I whispered. "We just won the first round." The garage was a concrete box that smelled of gasoline-damp cardboard and despair. It was not a guest suite. It was not a converted living space. It was a storage unit for old holiday decorations, lawn equipment, and my brother. I stood in the center of the room, shivering slightly. The temperature dropped 10 degrees the moment I stepped across the threshold. There was no insulation, no heater, just a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting harsh, long shadows against the oil-stained walls. I looked at the corner where Alvin had spent his last 5 years. It was a cot pushed up against a stack of winter tires. The mattress was thin, stained, and smelled of mildew. There was a small space heater, but the cord had been cut. I picked up the severed end. The copper wire gleamed in the dim light. It was a clean cut. Pamela had not just unplugged it, she had destroyed it. She wanted him cold. Cold keeps people docile. Cold keeps people focused on survival rather than rebellion. I sat down on the cot. The springs groaned under my weight. I looked around at the tools hanging on the pegboard. Hammers, screwdrivers, wrenches. They were pristine. Alvin was not a handyman. He was a scholar. He loved books, not socket sets. But looking at the workbench, I noticed something. The large red toolbox on the bottom shelf was covered in dust except for the handle. The handle was clean. Someone had been touching it recently. I walked over and knelt down. I opened the heavy metal latches. Inside, there were no wrenches. There was a stack of spiral-bound notebooks, cheap drugstore notebooks with wire bindings that were bent out of shape. I pulled the top one out. The cover said 2019. I opened it. The handwriting was shaky, but I recognized it immediately. It was Alvin's scrawl, the same handwriting that used to grade papers on Elizabethan poetry. But the words were not poetry. They were a chronicle of hell. January 3rd. It was freezing today. I asked Pamela if I could turn up the thermostat. She told me that heat is expensive and I do not pay the bills. She told me to wear another sweater. I am wearing 3. My fingers are so stiff I can barely hold this pen. Jordan came by today. He saw me shivering and laughed. He said I looked like a homeless person. I suppose I am. I am homeless in my own house. I closed the book. A wave of nausea hit me. I am a man who has seen combat. I have seen what shrapnel does to a human body. But this was different. This was a slow, deliberate dismantling of a human soul. I put the book down and picked up my bag. I had work to do. I was not going to cry over these pages. I was going to use them as fuel. I unzipped the duffel bag I had brought from the truck. Inside were 6 high-definition micro cameras with audio capability. I had bought them with cash at a spy shop 3 towns over on my drive down. They were the size of a quarter. They had a battery life of 6 months and uploaded directly to a secure cloud server. I took the first camera and a cordless drill. I walked out of the garage and slipped back into the main house through the side door. The house was quiet. Pamela was still at yoga. I moved to the kitchen. This was the battlefield where she used food as a weapon. I climbed up onto the counter. I drilled a tiny hole in the crown molding above the refrigerator. It was invisible from the floor. I inserted the camera lens. I secured it with industrial adhesive. As the glue dried, I thought about the entry I had read from March 15th. I was so hungry today. Pamela put a lock on the pantry door. She said I was snacking too much and getting fat. I am not fat. I have lost 20 pounds. I tried to eat an apple from the bowl on the counter, but she slapped it out of my hand. She said the fruit is for display, not for eating. I waited until they went to sleep and drank tap water until my stomach stopped growling. I tightened the screw on the camera mount. Now I would see everything. I would see every time she denied him food. I would see every time she locked that pantry. And the world would see it too. I moved to the living room. This was Jordan's domain. The massive flat-screen TV, the leather recliners, the wet bar. I placed a camera inside the ventilation vent, angling it perfectly to capture the entire seating area. I remembered the entry from July 4th, Independence Day. Everyone was outside having a barbecue. I could smell the burgers, I could hear the music. Jordan told his friends that I was sick and contagious, so I could not come out. He told them I had a senile aggression problem. I watched from the garage window. I saw them eating on the deck my father built. I saw Courtney throwing leftovers into the trash. Good steak, whole corn cobs. I would have eaten them out of the garbage if I had the chance. I felt a cold fury settle in my chest. It was a sharp, focused anger. I synced the living room camera to my phone. The image was crystal clear, 4K resolution of their greed. I could see the dust on the mantelpiece. I could see the labels on the expensive scotch bottles. I moved upstairs. The master bedroom. The door was closed but not locked. I pushed it open. The smell of Pamela's perfume was overpowering, lavender and cruelty. I walked to the bedside table. I placed a listening device behind the heavy oak headboard. I placed a camera inside the smoke detector on the ceiling. I thought about the entry from September 22nd, our anniversary, 30 years. I bought her a card with the money I saved by skipping lunch for a month. I wrote a poem inside. I thought maybe, just maybe, she would remember the girl she used to be. She opened it, laughed, and tossed it into the fireplace. She said poetry does not pay the mortgage. She said I was pathetic. Then she made me sleep on the floor because she said I smelled like old age. I finished the installation. 6 cameras, 4 microphones. The house was now a panopticon. I pulled out my phone and checked the feeds. Kitchen clear, living room clear, bedroom clear, dining room clear. I had eyes on every inch of their lives. I could hear them breathing. I could hear their secrets. I went back to the garage. I sat down on the cot again. I picked up the stack of diaries. There were 10 of them. 10 years of evidence. I opened the toolbox again and found a false bottom. Beneath the diaries was something else. A small velvet box. I opened it. Inside was our mother's engagement ring, the one Alvin was supposed to give to his daughter if he ever had one, or to a granddaughter. I opened the diary to the last entry written just 3 days ago. October 28th. Jordan asked about Mom's ring today. He wants to give it to Courtney to upgrade her setting. He thinks I lost it. He threatened to tear the garage apart to find it. I hid it under the toolbox. I will swallow it before I let that woman wear my mother's ring. I am tired. I am so tired. I think the pills are killing me. Maybe that is for the best. I snapped the velvet box shut. I put it in my pocket. I put the diaries back in the toolbox and locked it. Then I took the toolbox and carried it out to the truck. I hid it under the passenger seat. These were not just journals. These were the testimony of a murder victim who was still alive. I walked back into the garage. I looked at the cold gray walls. I spoke out loud to the empty room. You are not going to die here, Alvin, and they are not going to win. I lay down on the cot. It was uncomfortable. It hurt my back, but I needed to be here. I needed them to find me here when they came home. I needed to maintain the illusion for just a little longer. I checked the camera feed on my phone again. A car pulled into the driveway. A Mercedes. Pamela was back. I watched on the screen as she walked into the kitchen. She looked around. She put her yoga mat on the counter. She opened the fridge and took out a bottle of water. She had no idea that the tiny black dot above the fridge was recording her every move. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. The audio from the kitchen camera came through my earbuds crisp and clear. "Hello, darling," she said. Her voice was purring. "Yes, the old fool is back. He is in the garage. I think the new medication is working. He is docile. He barely speaks. Yes, I checked the accounts. The transfer went through. We are rich, baby. Just a few more weeks and we can dump him at the state home and fly to Cabo." I lay in the dark garage listening to her plan her own demise. She was talking to her lover. She was confessing to embezzlement. She was conspiring to abandon a vulnerable adult. And I had it all in 4K stereo sound. I closed my eyes. I let the cold of the garage seep into my bones. Let them think I am freezing. Let them think I am weak. The colder it gets in here, the hotter the fire is going to be when I burn their kingdom to the ground. Tonight for dinner, she would probably give me leftovers. She would probably yell at me. She might even hit me again. I welcomed it. Every insult was a data point. Every slap was a pixel in the picture I was painting for the jury. I rolled over on the thin mattress and pulled the scratchy blanket up to my chin. I was not Calvin Mercer, the billionaire engineer. I was Alvin Mercer, the prisoner. But unlike Alvin, I had the key to the cell. And on Friday, at the anniversary party, I was going to unlock the door and let the monster out. But the monster would not be me. The monster would be the truth. And it was going to eat them alive. The bottle rattled in Pamela's hand. It was a distinctive sound. It was the sound of a jailer locking a cell door. It was Thursday night. The kitchen was dim lit only by the under-cabinet lights that cast a clinical glow on the granite countertops. I sat at the small table in the corner, my hands resting on my knees, waiting for the ritual. Pamela stood by the sink, filling a glass with tap water. She did not use the filtered water from the fridge for me. That was for the family. Tap water was for the dog and for Alvin. She walked over to me, her heels clicking on the tile. In her palm lay 2 blue pills. They were small, oval, and innocuous looking. To the untrained eye, they looked like allergy medication or a mild pain reliever, but I knew better. I'd spent the afternoon researching the imprint code on the side of the pills I had saved from yesterday. They were a high-dose antipsychotic medication used to treat severe schizophrenia and mania. The side effects for a healthy person included confusion, memory loss, tremors, muscle rigidity, and sedation. She was not just drugging my brother. She was chemically lobotomizing him. She was erasing his personality 1 milligram at a time so she could manage him like a piece of livestock. "Here we go, Alvin," she said. Her voice was dripping with fake concern. "It is time for your vitamins. You know how grumpy you get when you miss a dose. We want you to sleep well tonight. Jordan is bringing a business partner over for breakfast tomorrow, and I do not want you wandering around looking like a ghost." I looked at the pills in her open palm. I looked at her face. She was smiling, but her eyes were cold. It was the face of a woman who had convinced herself that her cruelty was actually mercy. She truly believed she was doing what was necessary to maintain her lifestyle. I reached out with a trembling hand. I had perfected the tremor now. It was a rhythmic shaking of the wrist that made it difficult to grasp small objects. I fumbled with the pills. One of them slipped from my fingers and fell onto the table. "Oops," I mumbled. My voice was thick, imitating the slurred speech she expected. "Clumsy," she hissed. She picked up the pill and shoved it back into my hand. "Just put them in your mouth. Do I have to feed you like a baby?" I put the pills in my mouth. I lifted the glass of lukewarm tap water to my lips. I took a large gulp. I tilted my head back. I made a swallowing motion. I let out a soft exhale as if the water had washed them down. "Open," she commanded. I opened my mouth. I lifted my tongue. The pills were gone. "Good," she said. She patted my shoulder. It was a touch that made my skin crawl. "Now go to the garage. Go to sleep. And do not make a sound until I come get you in the morning." I shuffled out of the kitchen. I kept my head down. I dragged my feet, but the moment the door to the garage clicked shut behind me, I straightened up. I spat the 2 blue pills into my hand. They were starting to dissolve slightly, the bitter coating tasting like battery acid. I wiped my tongue on my sleeve. I wrapped the pills in a tissue and shoved them into a hollow space inside the wall frame where I had hidden the others. I sat down on the cot. My heart was beating slow and steady. This was not fear. This was preparation. Tonight the game changed. Tonight I was going on the offensive. I checked my watch. It was 9 o'clock. Pamela usually stayed up until 11, watching reality television and drinking white wine. Then she would pass out. I needed to wait. I reached into my duffel bag. During my trip to the pharmacy earlier that day, under the pretense of buying scouring pads for the floor, I had purchased a bottle of vitamin B12. The tablets were almost identical in size and shape to the poison she was feeding me. I had also bought a small file and some blue food coloring. I spent the next 3 hours working with the precision of a surgeon. I filed the vitamin tablets down until they matched the oval shape of the antipsychotics. I diluted the food coloring and carefully painted them until they were the exact shade of medical blue. It was tedious work. It required a steady hand and infinite patience. But I had plenty of both. By midnight, I had 30 fake pills that looked exactly like the chemical weapon Pamela kept on her nightstand. At 2 in the morning, the house was silent. I checked the camera feed on my phone. The living room was empty. The kitchen was dark. The camera in the master bedroom showed Pamela asleep. She was lying on her back, mouth open, snoring softly. The bottle of pills was sitting on the nightstand right next to her phone and a half-empty glass of wine. I stood up. I took off my shoes. I moved in my socks. I opened the garage door. It squeaked slightly. I froze. I waited. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. No movement from the house. I slipped into the kitchen. The air was cool. The refrigerator hummed. I moved through the shadows, avoiding the patches of moonlight that spilled through the windows. I knew where every creaky floorboard was. I had mapped them out during the day while I was cleaning. I stepped over the third board in the hallway. I skirted the edge of the rug where the floor was uneven. I reached the bottom of the stairs. This was the most dangerous part. The staircase was old wood. It groaned if you looked at it wrong. I stuck to the extreme edges of the steps where the wood was supported by the stringers. I moved one step at a time. Weight on the ball of the foot. Roll to the heel. Silence. I reached the top of the landing. The door to the master bedroom was ajar. I could hear the rhythmic sound of her snoring. It was a grating, wet sound. I crept toward the door. I pushed it open another inch. The hinges were well oiled. At least she maintained the house, even if she neglected her husband. I slipped inside the room. The smell of stale wine and heavy perfume hung in the air. I held my breath. I moved toward the nightstand. I was 3 feet away from the woman who had enslaved my brother. If she woke up now, if she saw me standing over her in the dark, the game would be over. She would scream, she would call the police, she would claim I was attacking her. I reached the nightstand. My hand hovered over the orange prescription bottle. I looked at her face. In sleep, she looked almost peaceful. It was a lie. Even her dreams were probably filled with avarice. I picked up the bottle. I did not make a sound. I unscrewed the cap. I poured the real pills into my left hand. I poured the fake pills from my pocket into the bottle. Then she moved. Pamela shifted. She let out a snort. She turned her head. Her eyes fluttered. I froze. I became a statue. I did not breathe. I did not blink. I lowered my center of gravity, ready to spring if needed. She mumbled something unintelligible, something about a reservation. Then she settled back into the pillow. Her breathing deepened again. I exhaled slowly through my nose. I screwed the cap back onto the bottle. I placed it exactly where it had been, aligning it with the water ring on the wood. I shoved the real pills into my pocket. I turned to leave, but then I saw it. Her phone was lighting up. A text message had just come in. I leaned closer. I read the notification on the screen. It was from Jordan. Spoke to the judge. He is ready for Friday. Make sure the old man is totally out of it. We need him drooling when he signs. I stared at the message. The confirmation. They were not just going to declare him incompetent. They were going to parade him in front of a corrupt judge while he was drugged out of his mind. I wanted to smash the phone. I wanted to wake her up and force-feed her the entire bottle of real pills. I wanted her to feel the confusion and the terror she had inflicted on Alvin. But I was a professional. Revenge is a dish best served cold, and I was going to serve it frozen. I backed out of the room. I navigated the hallway. I descended the stairs. I returned to the garage. When the door latched behind me, I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for an hour. I sat down on the cot. I looked at the handful of real pills in my hand. I walked over to the utility sink in the corner of the garage. I did not flush them. That would leave a trace. I crushed them into a fine powder. I mixed the powder with some old paint thinner I found on the shelf. I poured the toxic sludge into a container to dispose of later. I lay down on the mattress. For the first time in days, I felt a genuine smile tug at the corner of my mouth. Tomorrow morning, Pamela would wake up. She would give me the morning dose. She would expect me to be sluggish. She would expect my hands to shake. She would expect my mind to be a fog, but tomorrow the fog was going to lift. The vitamin B12 would kick in. My energy would return. My focus would sharpen. But I would not show it. Not yet. I would play the role of the invalid better than I ever had before. I would let her think the drugs were working. I would let her get confident. Overconfidence is the most dangerous enemy a soldier can face. And Pamela was drunk on it. I closed my eyes. I visualized the vitamin B12 entering my system. I visualized it repairing the damage she had done. I was rebuilding Alvin's body from the inside out right under her nose. Friday was coming. The judge was coming. The anniversary party was coming. And Calvin Mercer was ready. I slept for 3 hours. When I woke up, the sun was streaming through the dirty windows of the garage. I stood up and stretched. My joints felt loose. My head was clear. The door to the kitchen opened. Pamela stood there in her silk robe holding a cup of coffee. "Wake up, zombie," she called out. "Time for your medicine." I shuffled toward her. I hunched my back. I let my jaw hang loose. "Coming, dear," I mumbled. I walked toward her, and for a fleeting second I imagined I was a wolf in sheep's clothing, walking toward a very foolish shepherd. She handed me 2 of my hand-painted vitamins. "Swallow," she said. I threw them back. I drank the water. I swallowed the energy. "Thank you, Pamela," I said. She did not hear the mockery in my voice. She only heard the obedience. She turned away satisfied. "You are welcome," she said. "Now go clean the patio, and try not to fall down." I walked out to the patio. I grabbed the broom. I started to sweep. My movements were strong. My grip was tight. I swept away the leaves, and with every stroke I imagined I was sweeping away her lies. The poison was gone. The clarity had returned. And with clarity came power. The country club was a fortress of limestone and manicured ivy designed to keep reality out. It was Friday afternoon, the day of the annual Founders Luncheon. Pamela had dressed me in one of Alvin's old tweed suits. It smelled of mothballs and defeat. It was a size too big, hanging off my shoulders to emphasize my frailty. She wanted me to look pathetic. She wanted me to be the visual aid for her martyrdom. "Look at poor Pamela," the whispers would say. "She is a saint for taking care of that senile old man." I sat in the passenger seat of the Mercedes as she drove. She was rehearsing her lines for the afternoon. She checked her makeup in the rearview mirror, adjusting a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Now listen to me, Alvin," she said, not looking at me. "We are going to walk and say hello to the committee and sit at table 5. You will not drink wine, you will not eat messy foods, and for the love of God, do not try to tell any of your stories. No one wants to hear about 19th century literature. Just nod, smile, and look confused. If anyone asks how you are, just look at me and I will answer. Do you understand?" I looked out the window. The vitamin B12 was surging through my veins. My mind was sharper than a razor blade. I felt the vibration of the engine through the seat. I felt the texture of the leather. I was fully present. "I understand, Pamela," I said softly. My voice was raspy but steady. She glanced at me, suspicious for a second, then dismissed it. "Good. Just try not to drool on the tablecloth." We arrived. The valet opened the door. I stepped out, making sure to stumble slightly. Pamela grabbed my elbow, her fingernails digging into my skin. It looked like support to the onlookers, but it was a pinch of warning. We walked into the grand ballroom. The air smelled of expensive perfume lilies and old money. The room was filled with the elite of Atlanta. Men in suits that cost more than my brother's car. Women who had spent fortunes stretching their faces to look young. They were vultures in silk. Pamela navigated the room like a shark in a feeding frenzy. She stopped to greet the club president, a man named Sterling, who had a handshake like a wet fish. "Pamela, you look radiant," Sterling said. "And this must be Alvin. How is he holding up?" Pamela sighed, a theatrical exhale of burden. "Oh, you know, good days and bad days. Mostly bad lately. His memory is fading so fast. It is like living with a stranger." I stood there blinking behind my glasses. I saw Sterling look at me with pity. I saw him dismiss me as a non-entity. "Hello, Sterling," I said. He looked surprised that I could speak. "Hello, Alvin. Good to see you out." "He does not really know who you are," Pamela interrupted quickly. "He thinks you are the gardener. Come along, Alvin." She pulled me away before I could respond. We moved through the crowd. I saw faces I recognized from Alvin's stories, people he had known for decades, people who had abandoned him the moment he lost his utility. Then I saw him, Professor Eldridge. He was an old colleague of Alvin's from the university, a man of integrity. He was sitting alone near the bar. He looked up and saw us. His face lit up. "Alvin," he called out. He stood up and started to walk toward us. "Alvin, my friend, I have not seen you in ages." Pamela stiffened. She gripped my arm harder. "Keep walking," she hissed. Eldridge stepped in front of us. He reached out a hand. "Alvin, it is me, Thomas. We used to share an office. How are you, old friend?" I opened my mouth to speak. I wanted to shake his hand. I wanted to tell him that I was not crazy, that I was trapped. But Pamela stepped between us. Her back was to me, blocking me from view. "Oh, Thomas, I am so sorry. He does not remember you. The dementia has been very aggressive this year. It upsets him to see faces he cannot place. Please just let him be." Eldridge looked over her shoulder at me. His eyes were sad. "But surely, Pamela, just a quick hello. He gets violent when he is confused, Pamela lied smoothly. Her voice was low, confidential. For your own safety, Thomas. Eldridge pulled his hand back. He looked at me one last time, shook his head, and walked away. I watched him go. I felt a cold fire ignite in my stomach. She was not just stealing his money, she was erasing his history. She was burying him while he was still breathing. We sat at table 5. It was a round table near the back. Jordan and Courtney were already there. Courtney was wearing a new dress undoubtedly bought with the money they stole this week. She ignored me completely. The luncheon began. The club president gave a speech about community and charity. It was hollow and boring. Waiters circulated with wine. Pamela put her hand over my glass when the waiter approached. "Just water for him," she said. "He spills." I sat there watching them eat lobster bisque. The irony was not lost on me. 2 days ago I had spilled soup to ruin a bag. Today I was denied soup to save a tablecloth. The conversation at the table turned to me. They talked about me as if I were not there. "We are finalizing the paperwork for the facility in Stone Mountain," Jordan said, tearing a piece of bread. "It is for the best. He wanders at night. It is dangerous." Courtney nodded, checking her reflection in a spoon. "It is so hard on you, Pamela. You are a saint to put up with it for this long. I would have put him in a home years ago." Pamela dabbed her mouth with a napkin. "I tried," she said. "I vowed to take care of him. But when the mind goes, the person you loved is gone. All that is left is a shell, a burdensome shell." The table nodded in sympathy. A woman across from us, a socialite with too much jewelry, looked at me and clucked her tongue. "Poor thing. Does he understand anything we are saying?" Pamela laughed. "Oh no. He is in his own little world, probably thinking about his nursery rhymes." That was it. The line had been crossed. I reached for my water glass. I picked up a spoon. I tapped the glass. Ding, ding, ding. The sound cut through the chatter at the table. Then I tapped louder. Ding, ding, ding. People at the nearby tables turned to look. Pamela grabbed my wrist. "Stop that," she hissed. "Put the spoon down." I did not put the spoon down. I stood up. My legs were steady. I buttoned the jacket of the ill-fitting suit. I looked around the room. The conversation in the ballroom began to die down. People were staring. The crazy husband was making a scene. "Sit down," Jordan whispered harshly. "You are embarrassing us." I ignored him. I looked at the microphone stand on the small stage nearby where the president had just spoken. I walked toward it. Alvin Pamela shrieked in a whisper. "Get back here!" I reached the microphone. I adjusted the height. The feedback whined for a split second, silencing the entire room. 300 people turned to look at the disheveled old man on stage. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw Pamela frozen in her chair, her face a mask of horror. I saw Jordan looking ready to tackle me. I gripped the microphone. I did not use my command voice. I used Alvin's voice. But I infused it with the clarity of a bell tolling at a funeral. "We wear the mask that grins and lies," I recited, quoting Paul Laurence Dunbar. My voice echoed through the hall. "It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes." The room was dead silent. They had expected gibberish. They were hearing literature. "My wife," I continued, gesturing to table 5, "says I live in my own world. Perhaps I do, because in my world loyalty still has value. In my world, family is not a business transaction." I saw Pamela standing up. She was signaling to the waiters to cut the sound. "They say the mind is the first thing to go," I said, leaning into the mic. "But I disagree. I think the first thing to go is shame. We sit here in our fine clothes eating food we did not grow, spending money we did not earn, and we judge the silence of others as stupidity." I looked directly at Pamela. Our eyes locked across the room. "I may be old," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that the speakers amplified perfectly. "I may be confused sometimes, but I remember everything. I remember who fed me, and I remember who starved me." I paused. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. "Enjoy your lobster," I said. "It is likely the last expensive meal some of you will afford." I stepped back from the microphone. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then a few scattered claps started. It was Professor Eldridge. He was standing up, clapping slowly. Then a few others joined in, unsure if this was a performance or a breakdown. Jordan rushed the stage. He grabbed my arm. "Okay, Dad, that's enough. Time to go." He dragged me off the stage. I did not fight. I let my legs go limp, forcing him to support my weight. To the crowd, it looked like I had just had a momentary lapse of clarity and then collapsed back into senility. Pamela was waiting at the door. Her face was purple with rage. She did not say a word. She marched out to the valet stand. We waited for the car in a silence that screamed. When the Mercedes pulled up, Jordan shoved me into the back seat. Pamela got into the driver's seat. Jordan and Courtney took their own car. As soon as the doors closed and we were on the main road, Pamela exploded. "What was that?" she screamed, hitting the steering wheel. "What the hell was that? You humiliated me. I remember who starved me. Are you insane? Do you know who was in that room? The judge was in that room." She turned around to look at me, swerving the car slightly. "You stupid, ungrateful old leech. I should have left you at the asylum this morning. When we get home, you are going into the cellar. I am done with the garage. You want to act like a lunatic? I will treat you like one." I sat in the back seat. I watched the back of her neck. I watched the tendons strain as she screamed. I leaned forward. I reached out my hand. I placed my hand on her shoulder. "Get off me!" she yelled, trying to shrug me off. My hand moved from her shoulder to the back of her neck. I did not squeeze hard, just enough. I found the pressure point near the base of the skull, the spot that sends a wave of nausea and paralysis down the spine if pressed correctly. I pressed. Pamela gasped. Her hands flew to her neck, but she could not dislodge me. The car slowed down. "Keep your eyes on the road, Pamela," I said. My voice was not Alvin's voice. It was Calvin's. It was deep, guttural, and completely devoid of fear. She froze. She looked in the rearview mirror. She saw my eyes. They were not the cloudy eyes of a confused husband. They were the cold, dead eyes of a stranger. What?" she stammered. "Alvin." I leaned closer to her ear. "You talk too much," I whispered. "And you listen too little. Drive the car. And if you ever raise your voice at me again, I will break your finger. Do you understand?" I released the pressure point. She swerved the car back into the lane. She was hyperventilating. She looked at me in the mirror again, terrified. But I was already leaning back in the seat, looking out the window, my mouth hanging slightly open, my eyes unfocused. "Did we have dessert?" I mumbled in my old shaky voice. "I wanted the pudding." Pamela gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. She did not speak for the rest of the ride. She kept glancing in the mirror, trying to figure out if she had imagined it. Fear. That was the seed I needed to plant. She needed to be afraid. She needed to be off balance. When we got home, she did not put me in the cellar. She did not even yell. She parked the car and ran into the house, locking her bedroom door. I walked slowly to the garage. I sat down on my cot. I checked the camera feed. Pamela was in her room pacing. She was holding a glass of wine with two hands shaking. She called Jordan. He touched me," she whispered into the phone. "He grabbed my neck. Jordan, his grip. It was strong. It was like a steel trap." I smiled. "You are imagining things, Mom." Jordan's voice came through the speaker. "He's a frail old man. You are just stressed about the party. Take a pill and go to sleep. Friday is almost here." "Yes," she whispered. "Friday." I turned off the feed. "Yes, Pamela. Friday is almost here. And you have no idea who is coming to the party." I lay back on the cot. The country club speech was just the trailer. The main event was going to be a blockbuster, and I was the director, the producer, and the star. The house was silent except for the rhythmic swish of a mop against the hardwood floor. It was Saturday afternoon. Pamela was at the salon getting her hair dyed a shade of blonde that did not exist in nature. Jordan was on the golf course losing money he did not have. I was sitting in the library pretending to stare at a blank wall, but in reality, I was watching Maria. Maria was the housekeeper. She was a woman of about 40 with hands roughened by bleach and eyes that were permanently lowered in submission. She had worked for Pamela for 6 years. In that time, I doubt Pamela had ever looked her in the eye or asked about her children. To my sister-in-law, Maria was not a person. She was an appliance that cleaned toilets. I watched Maria wring out the mop. She looked exhausted. I saw her pause and rub her lower back. She looked at the family portrait hanging over the fireplace, the one of Pamela and Jordan smiling like sharks, and for a split second her mask slipped. I saw pure, unadulterated hatred in her eyes. That was the opening I needed. I knew Maria was the weak link in Pamela's security system. She had keys, she knew where things were hidden, but more importantly, she had been humiliated just as much as Alvin. and nothing bonds two people faster than a shared enemy. I waited until she moved into the library to dust the bookshelves. I stood up slowly. I walked over to the heavy oak doors and closed them. I turned the lock. The click echoed in the quiet room. Maria froze. She gripped the feather duster like a weapon. Her eyes went wide with fear. She thought the crazy old man was about to attack her. "Please, Mr. Alvin," she whispered, backing away. "I have to work. Mrs. Pamela will be angry if I am not done." I stopped. I stood up straight. I dropped the hunch in my back. I took off the thick glasses I wore to fake poor eyesight. I looked at her with the clear, sharp gaze of a structural engineer who spots a crack in the foundation. "Maria," I said. My voice was calm, deep, and completely lucid. "I am not going to hurt you, and I am not crazy." She blinked. She looked at my posture. She looked at my eyes. She was confused. The man standing before her was not the trembling invalid she had known for years. I walked over to the desk. I opened the drawer where I had stashed the envelope of cash I had withdrawn from the bank. I pulled out a stack of $100 bills, $5,000. I placed the stack on the leather desk pad. Maria stared at the money. It was probably 4 months of wages for her. "Sit down, Maria," I said. She hesitated, then sat on the edge of the sofa, never taking her eyes off me. "Mrs. Pamela says you are sick in the head," she whispered. "Mrs. Pamela is a liar," I replied. I picked up the money. I walked over and held it out to her. "This is for you. This is a bonus, for being the only person in this house who has treated me with kindness." She did not take it. She shook her head. "If she finds out, she will fire me. She will call immigration." "She will not find out," I said, "because you are not going to tell her. And you are not going to tell her that I am not sick. You are going to help me take her down." Maria looked up at me. The fear was fading, replaced by curiosity. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you pretending?" "Because she is trying to kill me, Maria. She is feeding me poison. She is stealing my money. And she plans to throw me into a state home next week so she can sell this house." I saw the recognition in Maria's face. She knew. She had seen the pills. She had heard the conversations. She had probably found the documents in the trash. She had just been too scared to speak. I pressed the money into her hand. Her fingers closed around it. "I need the blue file," I said. "The one she keeps locked in the bottom drawer of the china cabinet in the dining room. The one she thinks nobody knows about." Maria gasped. "How do you know about that file?" "I know everything, Maria. I know she hides the key in the potted plant by the window. I know she checks it every Sunday night. I need that file tonight," I continued. "I need to photograph the documents inside. And then I need you to put it back exactly how you found it." Maria looked at the money, then at the door. I could see the calculation in her eyes. $5,000 could pay for her son's tuition. It could fix her car. But more than that, this was a chance to strike back at the woman who had belittled her every single day. She looked at me. A small, fierce smile appeared on her lips. "She calls me stupid," Maria said softly. "She says I do not understand English well, but I understand everything." I smiled back. "I know you do. That is why we are going to win. Will you help me?" Maria nodded. "Tonight," she said, "when she drinks her wine. She passes out hard." I unlocked the library door. Maria stood up, hid the money in her apron, and went back to dusting. When Pamela came home an hour later complaining about the traffic, Maria was scrubbing the baseboards, invisible and obedient. Pamela stepped right over her, never suspecting that the woman on her knees was now a soldier in my army. Night fell. The house was a tomb. Pamela had consumed her usual half bottle of Chardonnay and was snoring in the master bedroom. Jordan was out at a club. I sat in the dark kitchen waiting. At 2 a.m, a shadow appeared in the doorway. It was Maria. She was wearing her street clothes, ready to leave, but she had stayed behind for the mission. She held up a small brass key. We moved to the dining room. We did not turn on the lights. I used the flashlight on my phone, keeping the beam low to the ground. Maria went to the massive china cabinet. She moved the heavy porcelain soup tureen, the replacement for the one I had broken, and found the false bottom in the drawer. She unlocked it. Inside lay a thick blue folder. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the holy grail of Pamela's deceit. I carried the folder to the kitchen table. I opened it. Maria stood guard by the door, watching the stairs. I scanned the documents. My engineer's brain processed the information instantly. There was the original deed to the house. It was a joint tenancy with right of survivorship. That meant if Alvin died, Pamela got everything automatically. No probate, no will could contest it. But then I found something else. A document clipped to the back. It was a prenuptial agreement from 30 years ago. I remembered Alvin telling me about this, but Pamela had sworn she burned it. I read the clause on page 4. In the event of infidelity leading to divorce, the offending party forfeits all claims to the marital home and spousal support. I almost laughed out loud. Infidelity. Pamela had been sleeping with her lawyer David for 2 years. I had heard them on the phone. I had seen the texts. But I needed proof that would stand up in court. And then I found the smoking gun. Tucked into the back pocket of the folder was a handwritten ledger. Pamela was arrogant. She kept records of her own theft. It was a list of cash withdrawals and transfers labeled Project Freedom. January $10,000 transfer to Shell account. March $15,000 sale of Alvin's bonds. April $50,000 loan against the house equity. It was a confession written in her own handwriting. She was not just spending money. She was systematically liquidating Alvin's existence to build a nest egg for herself and Jordan. I pulled out my phone. I photographed every single page. The flash was too risky, so I used the steady beam of the flashlight, ensuring every number and signature was legible. Click. 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 I was capturing the evidence that would send her to prison. "Hurry," Maria whispered. I heard a noise upstairs. I froze. I switched off the flashlight. We stood in the pitch black. The floorboards above us creaked. Someone was walking. It was Jordan. He must have come home early and passed out, but now he was awake. I heard the heavy thud of his footsteps moving toward the bathroom. Then the toilet flushed. Then the footsteps returned to his bedroom. A door slammed. Silence returned. I let out a breath. I finished photographing the last page. I closed the folder. "Put it back," I whispered to Maria. Exactly as it was. She took the folder. Her hands were steady. She was no longer just a maid. She was a spy. She locked the drawer. She hid the key back in the plant soil. We went back to the kitchen. "You did good, Maria," I said. "You did very good." She looked at me. Her eyes were shining. For the first time I saw hope in them. "Mr. Alvin," she said, "when you take the house back, will you fire me?" I put my hand on her shoulder. "Maria, when I take this house back, you are getting a raise. And you are never scrubbing a floor on your knees again unless you want to. You are the house manager now." She smiled. It was a genuine, beautiful smile. "Go home," I said. "Be safe. Monday is going to be a very interesting day." She slipped out the back door. I watched her car pull away. I went back to the garage. I sat on my cot and looked at the photos on my phone. I had the prenup, I had the ledger, I had the proof of the affair via the audio recordings. Pamela thought she was playing chess. She thought she had taken all my pieces. She did not realize that while she was busy capturing pawns, I had just promoted a pawn to a queen. I lay down, but I could not sleep. My mind was racing. I had the legal ammunition. Now I needed the trap. The anniversary party was in 5 days. That was the deadline. That was the stage. I needed to get these photos to my lawyer in Chicago. I needed to draft a new will. And I needed to set up the final sting. I looked at the camera feed of the dining room. The china cabinet stood there looking innocent. It held the secrets that would destroy this family. And the only person who knew was the crazy old man in the garage and the maid they ignored. I laughed softly in the dark. Never underestimate the invisible people, Pamela. We are the ones who see everything. Sunday morning arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. The air pressure was dropping, signaling a storm both outside and inside the Mercer residence. This was the day. The deadline was tomorrow. Jordan had arranged for the corrupt judge to sign the competency order on Monday morning. Once that paper was signed, Alvin would be stripped of his rights, thrown into a state facility, and the house would be sold within the week. They thought they were on the final stretch of a sprint. They did not know they were running straight off a cliff. I sat in the garage staring at the document my lawyer Sarah had couriered to a secure Dropbox in town overnight. I had retrieved it at dawn while Pamela was still asleep. It was a masterpiece of legal engineering. It was titled the Mercer Family Asset Protection Trust. To the untrained eye specifically, the greedy eye that only scans for dollar signs, it looked like a standard transfer of deed. It appeared to grant immediate control of the property to the next of kin to avoid probate taxes in the event of the owner's incapacitation. But the devil is in the details, or in this case, in Clause 14, Section B, printed in standard font on page 7. This clause stated that by signing as witnesses and beneficiaries, Pamela and Jordan were acknowledging that the primary asset, the house, was being transferred irrevocably into a blind trust managed by a third-party executor, effectively removing it from their personal reach forever. Furthermore, a subclause triggered an immediate forensic audit of all prior joint accounts if the grantor, meaning Alvin, was found to be under duress. It was a trap that only a greedy person would fall for. A cautious person would read it. An honest person would question it. But Pamela and Jordan were neither. They were desperate for a payday. I folded the document and placed it inside the blue folder I had raided the night before. I slipped the folder onto the kitchen counter right next to the coffee machine. Then I went to the living room and prepared for the performance of a lifetime. I needed to act sick. Not just confused, but critically ill. I needed to create a sense of urgency so panic would override their caution. I skipped my morning coffee to let the caffeine withdrawal add a natural tremor to my hands. I held my breath until my face turned red, then let it out slowly to create a blotchy, uneven complexion. I sat in the recliner and let my head loll back. Pamela walked in first. She was wearing a silk robe and a face mask. She saw the blue folder on the counter. I watched through my half-closed eyelids as she froze. She recognized it. It was the folder from her secret hiding place. "Who put this here?" she shrieked. She grabbed the folder, looking around wildly. "Jordan, get down here." Jordan came thundering down the stairs, shirtless and bleary-eyed. "What is it? What is burning?" "Your father," Pamela yelled, pointing at me. He found the file. He must have been snooping in the dining room. If he destroyed those papers, I will kill him. They both rushed toward me. I let out a low moan. I started to shake. This was not the subtle tremor of Parkinson's. This was the violent full-body convulsing of a man on the edge of a seizure. I gasped for air, clawing at my chest. "Dad," Jordan shouted. He did not sound worried. He sounded annoyed. "Stop acting up. What did you do with the papers? Help. Me." I stuttered, my voice barely a whisper. "The house." "He is having a stroke," Pamela said. Her voice was cold, calculating. "If he dies before tomorrow, the house goes into probate. It will take months to unlock the assets. We need that money now, Jordan." "The investors are waiting." I saw the panic in their eyes. It was not fear for my life. It was fear for their wallets. "I want to sign." I wheezed. I pointed a shaking finger at the blue folder. "Save the house. Taxes." Pamela looked at Jordan. "What is he saying?" "He wants to sign," Jordan said, his eyes lighting up. "He knows he is dying. He wants to sign the house over to avoid the death tax." "Check the folder," Pamela ordered. Jordan ripped the folder open. He saw the document I had planted. He saw the title, Asset Protection Trust. He saw the words, Immediate Transfer of Control. He did not read the rest. He did not look at Clause 14. He only saw what he wanted to see. The house. Today. "It is a transfer deed," Jordan said, scanning the first page rapidly. "It looks like the one we tried to get him to sign last year, but he refused. He must have kept it. Mom, this gives us everything. If he signs this, we do not even need the judge tomorrow. The house is ours today." "Get a pen," Pamela screamed. "Get a pen before he passes out." I let my head fall forward. I made a gurgling sound in my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut. I was playing chicken with their greed, and they were blinking fast. Jordan scrambled to the desk. He grabbed a black ballpoint pen. He ran back to me. He shoved the document onto the tray of the recliner. He forced the pen into my shaking hand. "Sign here, Dad," he yelled. "Right here on the line. Just do it and we will call an ambulance." I struggled. I let the pen slip from my fingers. It fell to the floor. Jordan cursed. He picked it up. He jammed it back into my hand. "Hold it. Damn it, hold it. I cannot." "See," I whispered. "Where?" Pamela grabbed my hand. Her touch was icy. She guided my hand to the paper. "Right here, Alvin. Just write your name. Do it for us. Do it for the family." I opened my eyes. I looked at her. I put every ounce of fake love and desperation into that look. "I love you, Pamela," I rasped. "Sign," she hissed. I put the tip of the pen to the paper. I scribbled a signature. It was messy, jagged, and barely legible. But it was there. Alvin Mercer. Now you too, I whispered. Witness it. Make it legal. Of course, Jordan said. He was practically vibrating with excitement. He grabbed the pen from my hand. He signed his name on the witness line with a flourish. He did not read the text above it that said, I hereby acknowledge the transfer of these assets to the Mercer Trust and forfeit all personal claims. He handed the pen to Pamela. She signed quickly, her signature sharp and aggressive. It is done, Jordan said. He held the document up like a trophy. We got it. The house is ours. I let out a long, shuddering breath. I closed my eyes and went limp in the chair. Call 911, Jordan asked, looking at his mother. Pamela looked at the document, then at me. She checked her watch. Give him a minute, she said. If he is still breathing in 10 minutes, we will call the non-emergency line. No need to rush and pay for an ambulance siren. They walked into the kitchen. I heard the distinct pop of a champagne cork. It was 9 in the morning. We did it, I heard Jordan say. We are rich. I can pay off the loan sharks by noon. Pamela laughed. It was a wicked, joyful sound. I told you, Jordan. I told you I would handle it. The old fool gave us everything. We can send him to Stone Mountain tomorrow and tell them he is indigent. We won't have to pay a dime for his care. I sat in the chair listening to them celebrate their victory. My heart rate slowed down to normal. My breathing steadied. I opened my eyes. The document was lying on the table where they had left it forgotten in their celebration. I needed to secure it, but I couldn't move yet. I had to play the part. Maria walked into the room. She had come in through the back door to start her shift. She saw me slumped in the chair. She saw the document. She saw Pamela and Jordan drinking champagne in the kitchen. She understood immediately. She walked over to the table. She picked up the document. She pretended to be tidying up. Leave that, Maria Pamela shouted from the kitchen. Do not touch anything. I am just moving it to the safe. Mrs. Pamela, Maria called back, her voice submissive. So nothing gets spilled on it. Pamela paused. Good idea, she said. Put it in the wall safe. The combination is my birthday. Maria looked at me. I gave her a microscopic nod. She walked to the study, but she did not put it in the wall safe. She slipped it under her sweater. She put a stack of blank papers in the safe instead. She walked past me. I got it, she whispered, her lips barely moving. I closed my eyes again. The trap was sprung. The bait was taken. The cage door had slammed shut and the lock had clicked. They were drinking champagne in a house they no longer owned. They were celebrating a fortune they had just signed away. 10 minutes later, I pretended to wake up. I groaned. I sat up slowly. Pamela walked in holding her glass. Oh, look who is back from the dead, she said. You gave us quite a scare, Alvin. I feel better, I said. The episode passed. Good, she said. Because you have packing to do. We are moving things along. She walked away, swaying her hips. She thought she was the queen of the castle. She did not know she was just a squatter with an eviction notice pending. I stood up. I walked to the window. I looked out at the garden. The storm outside had broken. Rain was hammering against the glass. But inside me, everything was calm. I had done it. I had used their own worst instincts against them. I had not thrown a punch. I had not fired a gun. I had simply handed them a rope, and they had eagerly, joyfully tied the noose around their own necks. Tomorrow was the anniversary party, the grand finale. I hoped they enjoyed the champagne, because the hangover was going to be brutal. The smell of fresh lilies was suffocating. It smelled like a funeral parlor, which was fitting because tonight was the death of a marriage, even if only one person knew it. Monday evening had arrived, and with it, the 30th anniversary celebration. The house had been transformed from a home into a stage set. Florists had spent the entire afternoon arranging massive bouquets of white orchids and roses on every available surface. Caterers in black uniforms were currently setting up a raw bar in the foyer, cracking open oysters and spooning caviar onto crystal dishes. I sat in the corner of the kitchen, nursing a glass of tap water, watching the spectacle of waste. I did the mental math as I watched. The flowers cost at least $4,000. The catering was easily $10,000. The vintage champagne chilling in the oversized silver buckets was $200 a bottle. Pamela was burning through $20,000 in a single night to impress people she secretly hated, all while plotting to throw her husband into a state-run facility because she claimed they were short on funds. The hypocrisy was physical. It felt like a stone in my gut. Pamela swept into the kitchen. She was wearing a blood-red silk gown that clung to her body. She looked striking, I had to admit. She looked like a predator at the top of the food chain. She was wearing the diamond necklace Alvin had bought her for their 25th anniversary, the one he had taken a second mortgage to afford. She stopped when she saw me. She frowned. Her face was a mask of perfectly applied makeup, but the disdain cracked through. "Why are you not dressed?" she snapped. "The guests will be here in 20 minutes. Do not tell me you forgot how to put on pants." I looked up at her. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I blinked slowly. I could not find my tie," I mumbled. She rolled her eyes toward the ceiling, asking a silent deity for patience. "It is on the bed, Alvin. Right where I left it. Go upstairs. Put on the tuxedo and brush your hair. You look like a frightened bird. And remember the rules. You sit in the corner, you smile, you do not speak. If someone asks you a question, you look at me." I stood up slowly. I shuffled past the tray of lobster tails. I wanted to grab one and eat it right there just to watch her scream. But I held back. I walked up the stairs, gripping the banister with both hands, listening to the click of her heels as she rushed off to yell at a waiter. In the bedroom, the tuxedo was laid out on the bed. It was a rental. It was cheap, polyester stiff, and uncomfortable. It was a size too small, chosen deliberately to make me look overgrown and awkward. I put it on. The collar was tight. It choked me. I looked in the mirror. I did not see Alvin anymore. I saw a man in a costume. I saw an actor preparing for the final act. I adjusted the bow tie. I did not tie it crookedly as she expected. I tied it perfectly. A symmetrical, sharp knot. Then I messed it up slightly. I pulled one end loose. I needed to maintain the illusion for just one more hour. I checked my pocket. The phone was there. The earpiece was in my ear, hidden by my hair. The feed from the cameras was live. I walked back downstairs. The doorbell rang. The first guests were arriving. I took my position. Pamela had assigned me a chair near the kitchen door, far away from the main seating area. It was the kind of spot you would put a naughty child or an embarrassing relative. It was perfect. From here I had a view of the entire room, but I was invisible to the crowd. The room filled up quickly. The air grew thick with the sound of polite laughter and clinking glasses. I watched them. The doctors, the lawyers, the country club members. They drank Alvin's wine. They ate his food. They complimented Pamela on her devotion. "Oh, you are a saint, Pamela," I heard a woman say. "A blue-haired matron with pearls the size of grapes. Keeping him at home with you. It must be so hard." Pamela sighed, touching her chest. "It is my cross to bear, Linda, but I made a vow, in sickness and in health, even if he does not know who I am anymore." I gripped the arm of my chair. The lie was so smooth, so practiced. She had turned my brother's suffering into her social currency. Jordan and Courtney arrived. They made an entrance loud and flashy. Courtney was wearing a sequined dress that caught every light in the room. She was holding a new clutch, not the Hermes bag I had ruined, but something equally expensive. Jordan was already drunk. I could see the flush in his cheeks. They worked the room, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. They avoided my corner as if it were quarantined. Eventually, they drifted toward the bar, which was only 10 feet away from my chair. They stood with their backs to me. They thought I was asleep. I had closed my eyes and let my head drop to my chest. I turned up the volume on my hearing aid. It was not a hearing aid. It was a signal booster for the microphone I had planted in the flower arrangement on the bar. I heard Courtney's voice, sharp and clear in my ear. "Did the judge sign the order?" she asked. "Yes," Jordan replied. His voice was low. "He picked it up an hour ago. We are good to go. The van from Stone Mountain is scheduled for 8 in the morning. 8, Courtney hissed. "That is too late. The realtors are coming at 9 to take photos for the listing. We cannot have him shuffling around while they are trying to stage the house." "Relax," Jordan said. "We will give him a double dose of the sedative tonight. We will drag him into the van while he is still out cold. He won't even know he is leaving until he wakes up in a shared room with 3 other vegetables." I sat there frozen. A double dose. They were planning to overdose him to make the transport easier. That could kill him in his weakened state. They did not care. If he died, it was even better for them. No monthly fees for the facility. Courtney laughed. It was a cruel tinkling sound. Finally. I am so sick of smelling him. Did you see the suit? He looks like a scarecrow. I opened my eyes. I looked at their backs, the sequined dress, the expensive tuxedo. They were celebrating a murder. It wasn't a murder with a gun, but it was a murder nonetheless. They were killing a man's life, his history, his dignity. I checked my watch. It was 7:30. The speeches were scheduled for 8. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my phone. I sent a single text message. Green light. Come to the front door. I put the phone away. I sat up straighter. I fixed my bow tie. I tightened the knot until it was perfect. I smoothed the lapels of the cheap tuxedo. I looked around the room. I memorized the faces. I wanted to remember exactly who was laughing when the music stopped. Pamela tapped a spoon against her champagne glass. The sharp ringing sound cut through the noise. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the grand staircase where she was standing. She looked radiant and triumphant. "Thank you all for coming," she began. Her voice trembled with fake emotion. 30 years. It seems like yesterday that I married my soulmate. She gestured vaguely in my direction, but she did not look at me. "We have had our ups and downs," she continued, "and lately more downs than ups. But love is not about the easy times. It is about standing by someone when the lights go out in their mind." The crowd murmured appreciatively. Someone sniffled. I stood up. I did not stand up like Alvin. I did not push myself up with trembling arms. I stood up with the power of a piston. I kicked the chair back. It fell over with a loud crash. The sound echoed in the silent room. Heads turned. Pamela froze mid-sentence. Jordan spun around at the bar, spilling his drink. I walked out of the shadowy corner. I walked into the light of the chandelier. I walked with a stride that ate up the ground. I did not shuffle. I marched. "Alvin," Pamela said, her voice tight. "Sit down. You are confused." I ignored her. I walked past the bar. I grabbed a bottle of champagne from the ice bucket. I didn't grab a glass. I held the bottle by the neck like a club. I walked to the center of the room. The guests parted like the Red Sea. They sensed the change. They sensed the danger. The man in the cheap suit was radiating an energy that terrified them. I stopped at the foot of the stairs. I looked up at Pamela. "I am not confused." "Pamela," I said. My voice filled the room. It was deep. It was resonant. It was the voice of a man who commands construction crews and negotiates steel contracts. I saw her eyes go wide. She recognized the tone. She had heard it in the car. Jordan ran forward. "Dad, stop it. You are making a scene." He reached for my arm. I moved. It was a simple movement. I shifted my weight, caught his wrist, and twisted. Jordan yelped and dropped to his knees. I held him there, pinned by his own joint. The crowd gasped. Courtney screamed. I looked at the guests. I looked at the judge who was standing near the buffet holding a shrimp. "I am so glad you are all here," I said. "Especially you, Judge Miller. I believe you have some paperwork for me." The judge turned pale. He dropped the shrimp. Pamela gripped the railing. "Who are you?" she whispered. "You are not Alvin." I smiled. It was a smile that promised Armageddon. "No," I said. "I am not. But he is." I pointed to the front door. The heavy oak doors swung open. Framed in the doorway, wearing a tailored Italian suit that I had bought him, stood the real Alvin Mercer. He was clean-shaven. He stood tall. He looked healthy. He looked like me. The room erupted in gasps. People looked from me to him and back again. The resemblance was perfect. The confusion was absolute. Pamela looked like she had been shot. She gripped her chest. She looked at me. Then she looked at the man in the doorway. Two of them. Alvin walked into the room. He walked right up to me. We stood shoulder to shoulder. The reflection was complete. I released Jordan. He scrambled backward on the floor, looking at us in horror. "Hello, Pamela," Alvin said. His voice was soft, but it was not weak. It was the voice of a man who had walked through hell and come out the other side. "Happy anniversary." I handed Alvin the bottle of champagne. "I think we have a toast to make," I said. The silence in the room was heavy, electric, and terrifying. The party was over. The trial had begun, and the verdict was going to be terminal. The silence in the ballroom was heavier than the massive crystal chandelier hanging above our heads. It was a physical weight pressing down on every guest, every waiter, and most heavily on the woman in the red dress standing at the foot of the stairs. Pamela looked from me to Alvin and then back to me. Her brain was trying to process an impossibility. She had spent 30 years breaking one man convinced he was solitary and weak. She never imagined that he was half of a whole and that the other half had arrived to burn her kingdom down. I stepped forward. The cheap tuxedo I was wearing felt like armor. I held the microphone in one hand and my phone in the other. I looked at the crowd. These were the people who had enabled her. These were the people who had looked the other way while my brother withered away. They did not deserve politeness. They deserved the truth. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice booming through the speakers without a tremor, "I apologize for the confusion. You all came here to celebrate 30 years of marriage, but what you are actually witnessing is the end of a 30-year hostage situation." Pamela found her voice. It was a screech high and desperate. "Security!" she yelled, pointing at me. "Get him out of here! He is an imposter! He is dangerous!" Jordan scrambled to his feet, rubbing his wrist where I had twisted it. He looked at the guests, his face pale and sweaty. "Please, everyone, just go home. My father is having a breakdown." He hired an actor. "This is all a sick joke." I did not shout. I did not argue. I simply walked over to the audiovisual station set up near the stage for their anniversary slideshow. The technician, a young kid in a black polo shirt, looked at me with wide eyes. I held out a $100 bill. "Plug this in," I said, handing him my phone. The kid looked at Pamela, then at the size of my fist, and made the smart choice. He took the phone. He plugged in the HDMI cable. The large projection screen behind the stage flickered. The image of a happy anniversary graphic disappeared. In its place, a grainy but high-definition video feed appeared. It was the kitchen. The timestamp was from 3 days ago. The room went deadly quiet. On the screen, Pamela was standing by the sink. I was sitting at the table hunched over. The audio was crystal clear. "Here we go, Alvin." The video, Pamela said, her voice dripping with condescension. "It is time for your vitamins." The real Pamela stood frozen in the center of the ballroom. She watched herself on the screen. She watched herself hand the pills to me. She watched herself verify that I had swallowed them. Then the video cut to a close-up of the bottle on the counter. I had zoomed in with the camera I installed above the fridge. The label was legible: risperidone, 2 milligrams. I paused the video. I looked at the crowd. I looked at Dr. Sterling, the club president. "Dr. Sterling," I asked, "you are a medical professional. Can you tell the room what risperidone is prescribed for?" Sterling cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable. He looked at Pamela, then at the screen. "It is an antipsychotic," he said quietly, "used for schizophrenia or bipolar mania." "And what happens if you give a high dose to a healthy man every day for 5 years?" I asked. Sterling adjusted his glasses. "It would cause sedation, confusion, tremors, memory loss, eventually permanent neurological damage." A gasp rippled through the room. It sounded like the air being sucked out of the space. Pamela lunged towards the AV table. "Turn it off," she screamed. "That is fake. That is a deep fake." He edited it. I stepped in front of her. I did not touch her. I just stood there, a wall of muscle and rage. "I am not done, Pamela," I said. I signaled the technician. The next video played. This one was from the garage. It was dark, illuminated only by the harsh light of the bare bulb. It showed Alvin, the real Alvin, shivering on a cot with no blanket. It showed Jordan walking in, kicking the cot to wake him up. "Get up, old man," the video. Jordan sneered. "Mom wants the garage cleaned, and stop crying about the cold. If you work harder, you will warm up." I looked at Jordan in the real world. He was shrinking against the bar, trying to make himself invisible. His friends, the investors he was trying to impress, were looking at him with pure disgust. "But that is not the worst part," I said into the microphone. "You abused him physically. You abused him mentally. But the reason you did it, that is the real punchline." I switched the image on the screen. It was a photograph. It was the ledger I had photographed in the dining room. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Pamela's looped cursive script. Project Freedom, the heading read. I zoomed in on the numbers. Transfer from joint savings $50,000. Sale of mutual bonds $120,000. Loan against house equity $200,000. I turned to the crowd. "You all think Pamela is a savior. You think she is managing a difficult situation. But look at the dates. Every time Alvin had a bad episode, a large sum of money disappeared from his accounts. She was not managing his illness. She was manufacturing it to liquidate his assets." Pamela was shaking her head violently. No, that is for his care. That is for medical bills. Private doctors. Really? I asked. I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. It was the bank record I had coerced from Henderson. I have the bank records right here, I said, waving the paper. There are no payments to doctors. There are payments to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. And there are payments to a lawyer named David. I looked at a man standing near the buffet. He was tall, silver-haired, and currently looking for an exit. "Hello, David," I said. The lawyer froze. Pamela turned to look at him. Her face went white. "We have the audio too, Pamela," I said. "The camera in the bedroom picks up everything, even the pillow talk where you and David discussed how long it would take for Alvin to finally die so you could cash the life insurance policy." The crowd erupted. It was no longer a polite society gathering. It was a mob. People were shouting. Someone threw a glass. It shattered against the wall. "You are a monster," a woman shouted from the back. Pamela looked around wildly. Her social armor was gone. Her mask had been ripped off, taking the skin with it. She looked at the judge. "Judge Miller," she pleaded, running toward him. "You know me. You know this is illegal. He is recording me in my own home. That is inadmissible. Arrest him." Judge Miller stepped back. He held up his hands as if she were contagious. "Actually, Mrs. Mercer," the judge said, his voice cold. "If the recording captures the commission of a felony, it is very much admissible. And I believe I just saw evidence of grand larceny, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit fraud. But I signed the order," Jordan shouted, stepping forward, desperate to salvage the plan. "The competency order." The judge signed it. "Dad is legally incompetent. Anything he says is invalid." I laughed. It was a dark, dry laugh that echoed in the ballroom. "Oh, Jordan," I said. "I almost forgot." The order. I reached into my inner pocket. I pulled out the document they had signed yesterday, the one they thought was the deed transfer. "You mean this order?" I asked. Jordan blinked. "No, that is the deed. We own the house. You signed it." I walked over to him. I handed him the paper. "Read Clause 14, Jordan," I said. "Read it out loud." Jordan looked at the paper. His hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. He squinted at the fine print. "The undersigned witnesses hereby acknowledge that all assets are transferred to the Mercer Blind Trust, and that they forfeit all rights to residency, effective immediately." He stopped reading. He looked up at me. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. "That is right," I said. "You did not sign a deed transfer to yourself. You signed a confession. You signed a voluntary surrender of the property. And by signing as a witness to my signature, you legally confirmed that I was competent enough to sign a contract." I leaned in close. "If I am competent enough to sign the house away, Jordan, then I am competent enough to testify against you in court. You just invalidated your own competency order." Jordan dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor like a dead leaf. Pamela screamed. It was a primal sound of pure rage. She launched herself at me. Her fingers were curled into claws. She wanted to scratch my eyes out. She wanted to silence the truth. I did not move. I did not have to. From the hallway, 4 uniformed police officers stepped into the room. They had been waiting in the kitchen, listening to every word via the speaker system I had set up. "Hold it right there," one of the officers shouted. Pamela froze. She looked at the police. She looked at her friends. She looked at the ruins of her life. "Officer," I said, pointing at Pamela, "that woman is in possession of a controlled substance without a prescription. And I believe if you check her purse, you will find the engagement ring she stole from my brother and claimed was lost." Pamela clutched her purse to her chest. The guilt was written in neon letters across her forehead. The officers moved in. They took her arms. "Get your hands off me," she shrieked. "Do you know who I am? I am Pamela Mercer. This is my house." "Not anymore, ma'am," the officer said, snapping the handcuffs onto her wrists. The click was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. They moved to Jordan. He did not fight. He just slumped to the floor, sobbing. Courtney tried to sneak away toward the patio doors, but a female officer blocked her path. "You too, Mrs. Mercer," the officer said. "We have video of you disposing of evidence." I watched as they were gathered up. The guests were filming with their phones. The flashbulbs popped like fireworks. This was not the anniversary party Pamela had planned, but it was certainly memorable. I walked over to Alvin. He was standing by the fireplace watching his tormentors being led away. He looked tired, but his head was high. I put my hand on his shoulder. "Are you okay?" I asked. Alvin looked at Pamela one last time as she was dragged out the front door, still screaming about her lawyer. He took a deep breath. He adjusted his cuff. "I will be," he said. I looked at the crowd. They were staring at us, waiting for an explanation, waiting for absolution. I picked up the microphone one last time. "The show is over," I said. "The bar is closed, and I suggest you all go home and check your own bank accounts, because people like Pamela never work alone." I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a thud. Alvin and I walked out of the ballroom, leaving the chaos behind us. We walked into the kitchen where the lobster was still sitting on ice. I picked up a lobster tail. I peeled it. I handed it to Alvin. "Eat up, brother," I said. "You paid for it." Alvin took a bite. He smiled. It was the first real smile I had seen on his face in 30 years. We stood there in the silence of the kitchen, twin brothers survivors eating lobster, while the sirens faded into the distance. The war was over, and we were the last men standing. The ballroom was suspended in a state of absolute paralyzed shock. It was a tableau of chaos frozen in time. The police officers held Pamela by the arms, but they had stopped moving. The guests had lowered their phones, too stunned to record. Jordan was on his knees, staring at the doorway with his mouth hanging open like a fish pulled from water. And in that doorway stood the impossible. Alvin Mercer walked into the room. He did not walk like the broken man they had known. He walked with a fluid, easy grace. He was wearing a navy blue Italian suit that cost more than the car Pamela drove. His hair was trimmed. His face was shaved. But it was his eyes that held the power. They were clear. They were sharp. They were the eyes of a man who had woken up from a long, dark nightmare. He walked across the parquet floor. The sound of his dress shoes was a steady rhythm against the silence. He walked straight to me. We stood shoulder to shoulder in the center of the room. Identical height, identical build, identical faces. The only difference was the energy. I was the hammer radiating force and anger. He was the shield radiating calm and resilience. I saw Pamela's brain trying to reject what her eyes were seeing. She looked at me, then she looked at him. She blinked rapidly as if trying to clear a hallucination. Her breathing became shallow and erratic. "No," she whispered. "This is a trick. Mirrors. It is a trick." I stepped forward. I looked at the crowd, then back at her. "It is no trick, Pamela," I said. "It is genetics, and it is justice." I pointed to the man beside me. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice cutting through the air, "you all know Alvin Mercer, the man you pitied, the man you ignored, the man you let rot in a garage while you drank his wine. But you do not know me." I placed a hand on my chest. "My name is Calvin Mercer. I am his twin brother. And for the last 30 days I have been living in your house." A gasp tore through the room. It was a collective intake of breath that sounded like a scream. Pamela's knees gave way. The officers had to hold her up. She stared at me with horror. "You!" she gasped. "It was you," I smiled. It was a cold, satisfied smile. "Yes, Pamela. It was me. When you threw that apron at my face, that was me. When you made me sleep in the garage, that was me. When you fed me those pills, that was me." She shook her head violently. No, you were confused. You were shaking. You spilled the soup." I laughed. I walked closer to her, invading her space. "I spilled the soup because I wanted to ruin that bag," I said. "I shook my hands because you expected me to be weak. I sat in that corner and let you talk about me like a dog because I needed you to feel safe. I needed you to be arrogant, because arrogant people make mistakes, and you made thousands of them." Jordan let out a sob from the floor. He looked up at Alvin. "Dad, is that you?" Alvin stepped forward. He looked down at his son. There was no love in his eyes anymore, only a profound disappointment. "Hello, Jordan," Alvin said. His voice was smooth, cultured, the voice of the professor he used to be. Dad, Jordan stammered, scrambling toward him. "I didn't know. Mom made me do it. She said you were sick. She said we had to take control. I was just trying to help you." Alvin looked at the man on the floor. He did not reach out a hand to help him up. "You were not helping me, Jordan," Alvin said softly. "You were burying me. I heard you. I heard you tell your friends that I was a burden. I heard you laugh when I asked for a blanket. I heard you plan to sell my house to pay your gambling debts. But that was him. Jordan pointed at me. That was Calvin. I said those things to him. Alvin shook his head. It does not matter which face you were looking at, Jordan. The hate in your heart was the same. You treated your father like garbage because you thought he was too weak to fight back. You did not realize that by hurting him you were waking up the only man in the world who could destroy you. Alvin put his hand on my shoulder. My brother came to save me because you would not. Alvin said, he gave me my life back, and now I'm going to use it. Pamela let out a wail. It was a high, keening sound of pure despair. She realized the scope of the deception. She realized that every time she had mocked me in the last month, she had been mocking a man who was recording her every word. You tricked me, she screamed, struggling against the cuffs. This is entrapment. You lied. You came into my house under false pretenses. I leaned in close to her face. I did not lie about who I was, Pamela, I said. You just never looked closely enough to tell the difference. You looked at me and saw a checkbook. You looked at me and saw a victim. You never once looked me in the eye and saw a man. If you had, you would have seen that my eyes are green and Alvin's are hazel, but you haven't looked him in the eye in 20 years. The crowd began to whisper. The judgment in the room shifted like the tide. Minutes ago, Pamela was the saint. Now she was the villain in a Shakespearean tragedy. She couldn't tell them apart, a woman whispered loudly. She lived with him for a month and didn't know it wasn't her husband. That is cold. She drugged the wrong twin, a man muttered. That is going to be a prison sentence. I turned back to the crowd. I wanted to drive the point home. I wanted to make sure no one in this room ever forgot this night. You are all wondering how this happened, I said. You are wondering how a wife could not recognize her own husband. It is simple. Indifference is a form of blindness. When you stop caring about someone, they become invisible. Pamela did not see Alvin. She saw an obstacle. She saw a problem to be solved. And when I stepped into his shoes, she saw exactly what she wanted to see. A fading, pathetic old man. I paused. I looked at Alvin. But she forgot one thing, I continued. She forgot that Alvin Mercer is not alone. She forgot that he came into this world holding my hand, and he will leave this world holding my hand. You tried to break him, Pamela, but you cannot break iron. Alvin reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box. Pamela stopped struggling. She stared at the box. She recognized it. You said you lost it, Alvin said. He opened the box. The diamond engagement ring sparkled under the chandelier lights. It was their mother's ring. The ring Pamela had claimed vanished years ago. You told me I lost it in the garden, Alvin said. You told me my memory was gone. You made me dig in the dirt for 3 days looking for it. I cried over this ring. I thought I had failed my mother. He held the ring up. But you had it the whole time, he said. You hid it in the bottom of your jewelry box, waiting to resize it for yourself. You stole my past to decorate your future. I didn't say, Pamela sobbed. I was keeping it safe. You lose everything. Alvin closed the box with a snap. I am not losing this, he said, and I am not losing my house, and I am certainly not losing my dignity anymore. He turned to the police officers. Take her away, Alvin said. Please. The smell of her perfume is making me sick. The officers nodded. They began to drag Pamela toward the door. She fought them. She dug her heels into the expensive carpet. Alvin, she screamed. You can't do this. I am your wife. I took care of you. Who is going to cook for you? Who is going to manage your pills? You will die without me. Alvin watched her go. He did not look sad. He looked liberated. I learned to cook in Chicago, Pamela, he called out after her. And as for the pills, I stopped taking them 3 weeks ago. I feel fantastic. Pamela's screams faded as she was shoved into the back of a squad car outside. The flashing blue lights reflected off the crystal glasses on the tables, creating a disco effect of disaster. Courtney was next. The female officer had her in handcuffs. She was not screaming. She was weeping, silently terrified. I didn't know, she whispered to Jordan. You said it was legal. You said we would get the money. Jordan looked at her. He looked at his father. He looked at me. He realized there was no way out. I am sorry, he whispered. I walked over to him. I looked down. Sorry does not sign checks, Jordan, I said. And sorry does not pay back the $300,000 you stole. You are going to prison. And when you get out, do not come here. Do not call. You have no father. You have no uncle. You have nothing but the greed you worshipped. The officers hauled them away. The room was finally cleared of the parasites. The guests stood there awkward and silent. They did not know what to do. Should they leave? Should they apologize? Alvin stepped up to the microphone. He adjusted his tie. He looked every inch the distinguished gentleman. "The party is over," he said, "but the catering is paid for, and the wine is open. I suggest you all have a drink. You look like you need it." He smiled. It was a genuine warm smile. "As for my brother and me," he said, looking at me, "we have some catching up to do." He put the microphone down. He walked over to me. We hugged. It was a strong, fierce hug. The kind of hug that communicates 30 years of missed birthdays and 5 years of estrangement. "Thank you," he whispered in my ear. "You saved my life." I patted his back. "You saved yourself, Alvin," I said. "I just provided the stage." We turned and walked toward the kitchen. The guests parted for us, staring with awe. We were not just men anymore. We were a legend. We were the Mercer twins. As we walked, I heard the whispers starting again. "Did you see his eyes? Did you hear his voice? I never knew Alvin had a brother. She messed with the wrong family." I smiled. Yes, she did. We walked into the kitchen. The staff was standing there terrified. The chef was holding a ladle like a weapon. "Relax," I said. "The show is over. Keep the change." I grabbed a bottle of champagne. Alvin grabbed 2 glasses. We walked out the back door onto the patio. The rain had stopped. The air was fresh and clean. We stood by the railing looking out at the dark garden. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. "Well," Alvin said, taking a sip of champagne, "that was dramatic." I laughed. I took a sip. It tasted like victory. "It was necessary," I said. Alvin looked at me. "So what now?" "The house is mine. The money is recovered. She is gone. Now," I said, "now we go fishing." Alvin laughed. It was a sound I hadn't heard since we were 20 years old. "Fishing sounds good," he said. "But first, I think we need to burn those sheets." I clinked my glass against his. "Agreed," I said. "We burn everything. And tomorrow we buy new furniture. Furniture that you choose." We stood there in the quiet night, 2 brothers against the world. The nightmare was over. The morning was coming. And for the first time in a long time, the future looked bright. But we weren't done yet. There was still the matter of the legal cleanup. And I intended to make sure that Pamela and Jordan felt every single inch of the law pressing down on their necks. The show was over, but the reckoning had just begun. The police cars flashing blue lights in the driveway were just the opening act. The main event was happening right here in the foyer, where the air still smelled of expensive perfume and impending doom. Pamela was gone screaming in the back of a squad car, but her accomplices were still standing on the marble floor they thought they would inherit. Jordan and Courtney stood huddled together near the coat check, looking like 2 children who had broken a vase, except they had broken a life. I watched them from the bottom of the stairs. Alvin stood beside me. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His silence was louder than any accusation. He just looked at his son, the boy he had taught to ride a bike, the man who had tried to sell him for scrap parts. Jordan wiped sweat from his forehead. His tuxedo was damp. He looked at the remaining police officers, then at me. He tried to summon a shred of his usual arrogance, but it came out as a pathetic whimper. "This is a misunderstanding," Jordan stammered, his voice cracking. "My mother, she is controlling. You know how she is. She forced us to go along with it. We were victims too." I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "Victims," I repeated. I walked over to the side table where my lawyer, Sarah Jenkins, had set up her temporary command post. Sarah was a woman who could make grown men cry with a single subpoena. She was wearing a gray suit that looked like it was cut from steel. She held a stack of files in her hand. "Sarah," I said, "please explain to my nephew the definition of a victim." Sarah stepped forward. She didn't smile. She adjusted her glasses and looked at Jordan with the clinical detachment of a coroner examining a corpse. "Mr. Mercer," Sarah began, her voice crisp and clear. "A victim does not forge signatures on loan applications. A victim does not set up shell companies in the Cayman Islands to launder stolen pension funds. And a victim certainly does not sign a document witnessing the transfer of assets while conspiring to commit involuntary commitment fraud." Jordan turned pale. He looked at the document in Sarah's hand. "But that paper," he whispered. "You said it was a trust." You said it protected the assets. It does protect the assets, Sarah said. From you. She opened the file. When you signed as a witness to Calvin Mercer's signature, believing him to be your father, you legally attested that the signer was of sound mind. That testimony invalidates the competency order you filed this morning. But more importantly, Clause 14, which you failed to read, triggered an immediate forensic audit of all accounts linked to your Social Security number. Courtney stepped forward. She was shaking. Her sequined dress rattled like a snake's tail. What does that mean? She asked, her voice high and shrill. What audit? We have our own money. Jordan is an investor. I looked at Courtney. I looked at the diamond bracelet on her wrist. I looked at the designer shoes she was wearing. You have no money, Courtney, I said. You have Alvin's money. And as of 10 minutes ago, that money has been repatriated. Sarah pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen and held it up. I just received confirmation from the bank, Sarah said. The emergency freeze order has been executed. Your personal checking accounts, your savings, and your credit lines have been suspended pending the investigation into wire fraud and elder abuse. Courtney gasped. She fumbled for her purse. She pulled out her phone. She opened her banking app. I watched her face as she saw the numbers, or rather the lack of them. It says 0, she whispered. It says insufficient funds. She looked up at me, eyes wide with terror. My cards, she asked. Declined, I said. All of them. Even the black card you used to buy that dress. You are currently wearing stolen property. Jordan grabbed Sarah's arm. You can't do this. I have outstanding loans. I have investors I have to pay back tomorrow. If the accounts are frozen, they will kill me. I stepped between him and Sarah. I removed his hand from her arm. That sounds like a personal problem, Jordan, I said. Maybe you can ask your investors for a character reference at your trial. Trial? Jordan choked out the word. Sarah handed a document to the police officer standing behind Jordan. This is the arrest warrant, she said calmly, issued by the district attorney an hour ago. Charges include conspiracy to commit grand larceny forgery, identity theft, and 2 counts of reckless endangerment of a vulnerable adult. The officer stepped forward. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked ominously. Jordan Mercer, the officer said. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. No, Jordan shouted. He backed away, bumping into a waiter. Dad, stop them. You can't let them arrest your son. He looked at Alvin. He looked at the man he had tormented for years, begging for salvation. Alvin looked at him. For a moment, I thought my brother might waver. I thought the soft heart that had gotten him into this mess might bleed one last time. Alvin walked over to Jordan. He stood 2 feet away. He looked at the handcuffs in the officer's hand. Then he looked at Jordan's terrified face. You are right, Jordan, Alvin said softly. I can't let them arrest my son. Jordan exhaled a sob of relief escaping his throat. Thank you, Dad. I knew you, because I don't have a son. Alvin finished. His voice was hard as stone. My son died the day he decided that my life was less valuable than a country club membership. The man standing in front of me is just a thief who shares my last name. Alvin turned his back. He walked away toward the patio doors. He didn't look back. Jordan's face crumbled. It was the face of a man who realized he had gambled his soul and lost. The officer spun him around. He kicked Jordan's legs apart. He slammed the cuffs onto his wrists. Jordan winced. The sound of the ratchet tightening was the only sound in the room. Courtney screamed as a female officer grabbed her arm. Don't touch me, she yelled. This dress is vintage. You are wrinkling it. I walked over to Courtney. I looked at the clutch she was holding. Actually, I said, that is evidence. I took the bag from her hand. I dumped the contents onto the side table, a lipstick, a phone, and a platinum credit card bearing Alvin's name. I picked up the card. I held it up for the guests to see. This is my brother's card, I announced. Courtney has been using it to pay for her Pilates classes while my brother was eating stale bread in a garage. The crowd murmured. The judgment was palpable. Courtney looked around, searching for a sympathetic face. She found none. I am pregnant, she lied, desperate. You can't arrest a pregnant woman. Sarah Jenkins didn't even blink. We will have the jail medical staff verify that Mrs. Mercer, Sarah said. But given that you were drinking champagne 10 minutes ago, I doubt that defense will hold up in court, or with Child Protective Services. The officer cuffed her. The metal bit into her wrists. She began to cry loud, ugly sobs that smeared her mascara down her cheeks. "Take them away," I said to the officers. The walk from the foyer to the police cars was a parade of shame. Jordan, in his tuxedo head, hung low, sobbing like a child. Courtney stumbling in her high heels, the sequins of her dress flashing ironically under the police lights. The guests parted to let them pass. No one said a word. No one offered to call a lawyer. They just watched. They watched the fall of the House of Mercer. They watched the people they had envied being dragged out like common criminals. I followed them to the door. I wanted to see it. I wanted to see the doors of the squad car close. Jordan looked at me one last time through the window. His eyes were pleading. I just stood there. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just watched. The car drove away. The red taillights faded into the night. I turned back to the room. Sarah was packing up her files. "The freeze is total, Calvin," she said. "We seized the boat Jordan bought last month. We seized the vacation condo in Florida. We even put a lien on Courtney's jewelry. Every penny they stole will be recovered. It might take a few months, but Alvin will get it all back." "Thank you, Sarah," I said. "You are worth every dollar." I walked through the silent house. The party was officially over. The guests were leaving, filing out quietly, whispering apologies to Alvin as they went. They were eager to distance themselves from the scandal. I found Alvin on the patio. He was looking at the stars. He held a glass of champagne in his hand, but he wasn't drinking it. "They are gone," I said. Alvin nodded. He didn't turn around. "Did they have any money left?" he asked. "Nothing," I said. "Sarah drained their accounts to cover the restitution. They will have to use a public defender. And when they get out, they will be starting from zero. Actually, less than zero. They will have felony records." Alvin took a deep breath of the cool night air. "Good," he said. He turned to look at me. "Do you know what the worst part was, Calvin?" he asked. "It wasn't the cold garage, it wasn't the hunger. It was knowing that they were using my money to buy things they didn't need to impress people who didn't care while I was rotting." I nodded. I knew. I had seen the ledger. "Well," I said, "they won't be impressing anyone where they are going." Alvin poured the rest of his champagne over the railing onto the garden below. "A libation for the past." "I am tired, Calvin," he said. "I am so tired." "Go to sleep," I said. "Take the master bedroom. It is yours again. I will wait for the cleaning crew." Alvin smiled. He walked toward the French doors. He stopped and looked back. "You know," he said, "I always hated that Hermes bag." I laughed. "Me too, brother. Me too." I watched him walk into the house. He walked straight. He walked tall. He walked like a man who owned his own life again. I stayed on the patio. I looked at the empty driveway. The police lights were gone. The silence was heavy and sweet. I pulled out my phone. I deleted the camera app. I didn't need to watch them anymore. The show was over. The bad guys had lost. The good guys had won. And Pamela. She was probably sitting in a holding cell right now, realizing that her diamonds had been replaced by steel bars. She was realizing that the man she thought was a fool had played her like a fiddle. I took a sip of my drink. It was cold. It was crisp. Justice, I thought, tastes a lot like expensive champagne. But tomorrow, the real work would begin. We had to rebuild. We had to turn this house back into a home. We had to scrub the memory of them from every corner. I was ready. Alvin was ready. I went back inside. I turned off the lights in the ballroom. Darkness fell over the scene of the crime. Good night, Jordan. Good night, Courtney. Good night, Pamela. Enjoy the silence. You earned it. The morning sun hit the kitchen floor, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air where the grand piano used to sit. The piano was gone. It had been rented anyway, just like everything else in Pamela's life, a temporary prop for a stage play that had finally closed. I sat at the kitchen island drinking coffee that tasted like freedom. For the first time in a month, I did not have to hunch my shoulders. I did not have to fake a tremor. I was just Calvin Mercer sitting in my brother's house, watching him reclaim his life one small movement at a time. Alvin was standing by the stove. He was making pancakes. It was a simple act, but under Pamela's regime, it would have been a crime. She never let him cook. She said he was too messy, too slow, too dangerous. Now he flipped a pancake with a wrist that was steady and strong. He was humming a tune I had not heard since we were teenagers. It was an old jazz standard our father used to play. He put the plate in front of me. Blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup, not the sugar-free substitute Pamela forced him to eat. Eat up, he said. You look thin. I think playing the starving invalid took a toll on you. I laughed. I took a bite. It was the best thing I had tasted in weeks, so I asked, have you decided what to do with her clothes? Alvin looked at the ceiling as if the answer was written in the plaster. I called a charity, he said, a women's shelter. They are coming at noon to take everything. The furs, the dresses, the shoes. I figured it is poetic justice. Her vanity will finally serve a purpose. It will help women who actually need protection instead of a woman who preyed on the vulnerable. I nodded. It was a good decision. Alvin was not vindictive. He was practical. The phone on the wall rang. It was the landline, the one Pamela used to monitor. Alvin froze. The old reflex was still there, the instant tension in his shoulders. He looked at the phone like it was a bomb. Let it ring, I said. No, Alvin said. He put down his spatula. I think I know who that is, and I think I need to answer it. He walked over to the phone. He picked it up. He put it on speaker. Alvin, is that you? It was Pamela. Her voice was tinny, echoing from the county jail. She sounded small. She sounded desperate. Alvin, please, you have to help me. The public defender is an idiot. He says I am looking at 10 years. You cannot let them do this to me. I am your wife. We have a history. Remember the good times. Remember our honeymoon in Charleston. I watched my brother. I saw the muscles in his jaw tighten. He closed his eyes for a second. I remember Charleston. Pamela, Alvin said. His voice was calm, devoid of the fear she was counting on. I remember you complaining about the hotel. I remember you flirting with the waiter. And I remember you telling me that I was lucky you married me because no one else would want a boring academic. Alvin, baby. I was young. I was stupid. I love you. You know I love you. Just post the bail. Please, I cannot stay here. The bed is hard. The food is terrible. Alvin laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. The bed is hard, he asked. Is it harder than the concrete floor of a garage in November? Is the food worse than the table scraps you fed me while you ate steak? There was silence on the other end. Listen to me, Pamela, Alvin continued. And listen closely, because this is the last time you will ever hear my voice. You do not love me. You never loved me. You loved the security I provided. You loved the house. You loved the status. I was just the ATM machine that breathed. Alvin, don't say that. I am filing for divorce this morning, he interrupted. The papers will be served to your cell, and do not worry about the house. I am selling it. I am erasing every trace of you from my life. Alvin, wait. You can't leave me here. I have nothing. Alvin looked at me. He winked. You have your memories, Pamela, he said. Try to sell those. He hung up the phone. He didn't slam it. He placed it gently back in the cradle. It was the gentle closing of a coffin lid. He turned back to the stove. Who wants more syrup? He asked. We spent the rest of the week dismantling the museum of greed she had built. We boxed up the gaudy statues. We ripped up the white carpets that we were never allowed to walk on. We hired a crew to repaint the walls. We chose colors she would have hated, deep blues, warm earth tones, colors that felt like life. On Friday, exactly 1 week after the party, we locked the front door. We got into my car. We drove north. We drove out of the city, past the suburbs, past the noise and the traffic. We drove until the roads turned to gravel and the air smelled of pine needles and damp earth. We arrived at the old cabin by the lake. It was our grandfather's place. It was the only piece of property Pamela hadn't touched because she thought it was a worthless shack. She was wrong. It was a sanctuary. We walked down to the dock. The water was glass reflecting the gray sky. It was quiet. No phones, no cameras, no judges, just the sound of a loon calling in the distance. We sat on the edge of the dock, our legs dangling over the water. We baited our hooks in silence. Alvin cast his line. It landed with a soft plop. Do you remember, he asked, staring at the bobber. When we were 10 years old, we tried to switch places in school. I smiled. I remember. Mrs. Higgins caught us in 5 minutes. Alvin chuckled. Because I couldn't do the math problem, and you couldn't recite the poem. We sat there for a long time watching the ripples fade. I almost lost myself, Calvin, he said quietly. I almost forgot who I was. If you hadn't called, if you hadn't come, I think I would have died in that garage. I think I wanted to. I looked at my brother. I saw the scars on his soul, but I also saw the healing tissue forming. You didn't die, I said. You endured. That takes a different kind of strength. I fought her with aggression. You fought her with survival. We just needed to combine our tactics. Alvin reeled in his line a little. I learned something, he said. I learned that family isn't just about blood. It is about who shows up when you are bleeding. Jordan, he has my blood, but he didn't show up. You showed up. That is what brothers do, I said. Alvin looked at me. His eyes were serious. I am not going to let this happen again, he said. I am going to travel. I am going to write that book I always talked about. I am going to live Calvin, really live, not just exist in the corners of someone else's life. Good, I said, because I booked us tickets to Italy next month. I hear the fishing in the Mediterranean is excellent, and the wine is better than anything Pamela ever bought. Alvin smiled, a real wide smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Italy, he said. I like the sound of that. We sat there as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. We didn't catch any fish that day. It didn't matter. We weren't fishing for food. We were fishing for peace, and we had caught plenty of it. I looked at my twin. He looked back at me. We didn't need to speak. We knew. We had walked through the fire and come out unburned. The world is full of people like Pamela, people who take, people who destroy. But the world is also full of people like us, people who stand up, people who protect. As the first star appeared in the sky, I reeled in my line. Ready to go, I asked. Alvin stood up. He stretched his arms toward the sky. I am ready, he said. We walked back up the path to the cabin. The lights were on inside, warm and inviting. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't a showplace. It was just a small wooden house in the woods, but it was ours. And for the first time in 30 years, it was safe. I put my arm around my brother's shoulder. Welcome home, Alvin, I said. He looked at me and I saw a tear slide down his cheek. But it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of gratitude. It is good to be back, he said. And it was. Because the fall of the tyrant was satisfying. The legal victory was sweet. But this moment of quiet freedom, standing under the stars with the person who knew me best in the world, this was the only victory that truly mattered. This journey taught me that blood does not make a family. Loyalty does. For years, my brother Alvin believed that enduring abuse was a form of love. But silence in the face of cruelty is not nobility, it is self-destruction. We often fear being alone, but I have learned that it is far better to be alone with your dignity than to be surrounded by people who view you as a resource rather than a human being. It is never too late to rewrite your story. No matter how old you are or how much you have lost, you always have the power to stand up, reclaim your voice, and build a life that honors your worth. If you enjoyed seeing justice served today, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of truth and redemption. I want to know your thoughts. Have you ever had to cut a toxic family member out of your life to save your own peace? Let me know in the comments below and tell me which city you are watching from. Don't forget to check out the other videos on the screen for more life-changing stories. See you in the next one.